IB Nation, welcome back to another edition of the Hours Breakdown podcast. It is Friday, and that means it is Friday free for all mailbag time. I'm going solo today. Everybody else has something else going on today, unfortunately. So you guys are stuck with just me today. So that means whatever questions you want to ask about Notre Dame football, Notre Dame recruiting. Obviously, it's a big official visit weekend. If you're not on the message board, you're missing out. I put an intel piece on Derek Meadows on the board, and also have is Ryan has multiple intel pieces from this past weekend's or this past week's visit. So Dylan Robinson, he's got something on John Anthony Hall, Jadon Blair, and then also he's got already something on Ivan Taylor, who is on campus now. So he's got some intel on there and a story on there. And then I have the Derek Meadows piece. So if you're not on the message board, folks, you are missing out. Boards at irishbreakdown.com. You can go check that out. Today's mailbag. Any questions you have related to Notre Dame football, if you have anything related to Notre Dame recruiting, if you have anything related to college football, we'll try to stick to those topics today as best we can. And obviously, if there's some fun, interesting non-topics not related to those, I'll try my best to answer them. But those would be the things that we focus on. If you have a question, put MB on there and put the mailbag emoji or the mailbox emoji, and I'll know that those are questions to bring up. I will try to best I can as I see super chats pop up. I'll try to put those immediately to the top and get to those as well. So always appreciate those. Always thankful for those. We actually do have a few super chats to start the show, so we will get to those. But a lot going on obviously this week. We're gonna have the guys are gonna have a show at 5:00 today, and then we'll be back at it on Monday, getting back to our Notre Dame recruiting breakdown with Ryan and Sean. And then Tuesday, Vince and I'll be back to start, or actually, no, Vince is going to be at a camp Tuesday. So I'll be solo again on Tuesday. Then Wednesday, we'll get back to action on previewing this Notre Dame football team for 2024. I'm excited about the season. My dad called me, or I called my dad last night to check on him, see how he was doing. He was actually working late at the office, and he goes, I'm sitting there trying to talk to him to see how he's doing with life. And he goes, man, we're going to be so good this year. He's like, we're so talented. He's so excited about the season. And there's a lot of people are. And I hope that continues. And I hope that continues all summer as we enjoy getting ready to talk about this team. So we're going to get into the mailbag next, everybody. Again, leave that MB or mailbox emoji, and I will get to those as best I can. We've already got 43 questions starred. If you, as I said, also, if you want to get something put to the top, go ahead and throw a super chat in there. So let's get ready to rock and roll on this week's Notre Dame football mailbag. As I said, we have some super chats. So we're going to get started off with those. John A1's got a trio of super chats. So, John, I appreciate you. Thank you for all three of those. First one is, which Notre Dame players on the verge of making a big jump in fall camp based on what you know now? Well, there's a lot of different ways to look at big jump, John. One is going to be big jump from just perception, production from last year. Some of those guys that have kind of already started to make those big jumps, like first guy that pops in my head on offense is like Jaden Greathouse is a guy that pops in my head. Eli Raridan is a guy that pops in my head. Emil Wagner's a guy that pops in my head. Billy Shrout is a guy that pops in my head for all for different reasons, right? They're all at different levels right now in regard to their development as players. And so, when I think about guys that I anticipate making a big jump, it is kind of an interesting aspect to it, because there's so many different ways that you could kind of take that big jump. So I'll just kind of define it as this, John. I'll go guys that maybe didn't play a ton last year or didn't produce a ton last year that are going to make big jumps, or guys that even if they played a lot, still didn't, are going to make big jumps this season. So I mentioned some of them. Greathouse on offense. That's certainly one for me. I think Billy Shrout's a guy that's going to make a huge jump this year. Maybe Ashton Craig as well. It wouldn't shock me. Charles Jagasol. I just think all those guys are going to really make jumps in fall camp. I still think the offensive line is going to have some early season ups and downs. There's no doubt about that. They're a young group. But I'm also someone who thinks that there's going to be a lot more confidence about this group going into the season than maybe a lot of people have right now, just because I do have a lot of confidence in the talent there and some of the things that I've heard about how guys are progressing and moving forward here right now. So those are some names offensively. I think CJ Carr is another guy that's going to make a big jump in the fall, just based on some things I've heard about how he's performing and developing and enhancing. If you look at the two running backs, Jeremiah Love, Jadarian Price, I mean, I think a lot of the big jumps are going to be on offense, just for obvious reasons. Defensively, Jason Onye's one that I think is going to make a big jump this fall. Uh, Drake Bowen is a guy that I think is going to have a big jump in fall camp. I think Kingston and Jaden Osbury are two young guys that are also both going to have really big jumps in fall camp, and they're going to play a bunch. And in the secondary, Christian Gray is the first guy that comes to mind for me, is a guy that just has loads of talent and is going to be someone that's going to have a chance to go out there and really, really kind of explode and be a guy that can not only be an impact player for Notre Dame, but someone who can be a different, I mean, someone who's going to be a national name. Like, wow, we know Benjamin Morrison's really good, but man, they could even be, they're going to be even better maybe, or he might even be better some point in time down the road. So those are names that off the top of my head, John, that I think about when I think about guys are going to make big jumps. All right, next one from John A1. Thank you, John, for this super chat. Now that Chris Tyree is gone, Notre Dame brought in Jaden Harrison and Chris Mitchell. Will they both be the home run threat Tyree was in the past game in 2024? I don't know about Harrison, because I just don't know if he's going to play a ton for Notre Dame. He's a very explosive athlete, but it's kind of like, where's he going to play? And when he's on the field, that means you don't have Jaden Greathouse or Jordan Faison on the field. And I know he's really fast and explosive, and he did some nice things this spring, but he still looks like kind of more of an athletic guy than a natural receiver. So, is he going to be a guy that's going to come in and stretch the field a lot? Maybe. But I think he's a guy that most likely when he's on the field, I think he's a different type of player than Chris Tyree. They're both fast, but I think Jaden Harrison's a little bit better with the ball in his hands. I think Chris has more true vertical speed, at receiver from what I've seen, and separation ability based on what we saw last year. Chris was a near 20 yards per catch guy almost the entire season. He had a game late that dropped him under 20. Jaden Harrison hasn't been that kind of guy on offense. He's been that guy on special teams, but not on offense. So I don't know about that. I think Chris Mitchell will be similar to that, to what Chris Tyree was last year from a production standpoint. I think the nature of that position is going to give him a lot of chances to get the ball in space, get the ball down the field. Now, will the slot position give you the same type of big play ability? Maybe. I mean, Mike Denbrock's offense certainly plays to that, that opportunity to get the slots and matchups. Because a lot of times if you have good slot receivers, you can really do damage, because most teams don't put their best corner in the slot. Some do. I mean, you could argue that Iowa's best corner this year is going to be a guy that plays the slot. But more often than not, it's not your best corner. So if you have a really dynamic slot, you're some very favorable matchups you can get, whether it's against the other team's nickel, whether against the other team's safety, whether it's against a linebacker. There's always these type of opportunities to get in some really favorable matchups. And so there's certainly opportunities for the slot to be able to go out there and be effective and make some big plays. And you see Mike Denbrock's offense. I've talked about the number one pass play they ran last year, from what I can tell, not only from my breakdowns, but it's certainly the most productive pass play they ran all year last year. And that's the slot fade concept. And that's a play that's designed ideally to get a big play to that slot receiver. And that's something that I think you're going to see a ton of from this team, and that's going to create some big play opportunities. Does that mean that Jaden Harrison's going to get those? Will they put Chris Mitchell there at times? I think so. And so, but I don't know it'll be quite like the way Chris Tyree did it last year. And so we'll see. But I think there's a lot. I think they're going to have more big play potential in the boundary this year. I think they're going to have more consistency from the field position. All those things are things that I put a lot of value in and think that they're going to perform well this year. All right, got a couple more super chats here. Last one from John A1. Thank you, John. If Cam Williams playing fast at the end of the fall camp in the basic fundamentals of the position, Will he be in the rotation? What would that look like? So, John, I purposely did not talk about Cam Williams in your previous question because John put these back to back to back. And if I were to talk about a guy that could potentially add that 20 catch, 20 yards per catch guy that Tyree was last year, that Tobias Merriweather was last year, that you're losing, it could be a guy like Cam Williams. Because to your point, like, look, Cam doesn't need to know. It drives me nuts when you get these coaches that are like, well, he doesn't play because he doesn't know the whole offense or he doesn't know the whole route tree. And nothing drives me more nuts than that. Like, yes, there's limitations to how much you can ask a guy to do if he doesn't know the offense or doesn't know the route tree. But when you have a guy that's 6'2", that's over 200 pounds, that runs a 4.4, that's long, that catches the ball well, and is as dynamic as Cam Williams, if he only knows 4 routes, then you put him in a game at times to let him run those 4 routes. I mean, geez Louise, if you can get him in the game early and hit a bomb to him in the first game of the year or second game of the year, and now all of a sudden teams are going to have to look at him and say, hey, when this guy's in the game, we've got a plan for him. Say, well, teams are going to know that he only runs 4 routes. So let them try to defend those 4 routes that are all vertical, and that's going to open up some other opportunities for you to maybe take a double team away up top and open up an isolation in the intermediate or underneath routes. So I think that would be a missed opportunity not to use him. Cam's got to put in the work to learn as much as he can. But by the time you get to the last couple weeks of fall camp, you need to be saying, hey, listen, we got to find a way to get this kid on the field in some way. So if it's 5 snaps a game, 10 snaps a game, let's just give him a chance to go out there and make some plays. That's what I would do. He's too dynamic, in my opinion. So what would it look like? It'd be that. If Cam's just has a small package, let him come in there, catch a couple screens, have him. I mean, look, he knows how to run a hitch. He knows how to run a slant. He knows how to run a go route. He knows how to run a post route. And it's not that hard to teach him, crossers and overs. That's a good foundation to build around, and he can turn around and catch a now screen and then go do something with it. So those are all things that I think it would be wise for Notre Dame to try to find and maybe even force feed that for Cam, because he just brings an element that you don't have a lot of at that size. Jaden Harrison has speed that's probably better than Cam Williams, but he's 5'10". Chris Mitchell might have more speed than Cam Williams, maybe. He's 6'1", 180 pounds. Cam's 6'2" plus and already over 200 pounds with really long arms. You got to try to figure out a way to get him into the rotation at some point in time and see what he can do. It doesn't have to be a regular guy, 25 snaps a game against Texas A&M, but I think there's certainly a role that you can utilize Cam Williams. Got a super chat from AST12321. With a Michigan visit after Notre Dame is in the cards for Ivan Taylor, is it time for the staff to make him decommit if he won't shut it down after this weekend? I still think a lot of you are – I've said this already in the show. I've said it multiple times this week. Notre Dame's policy is not to force a kid to decommit. It never has been to force a kid to decommit who's committed to Notre Dame. The only forced decommitments they have is if you are committed to some other team, you can't take a visit here unless you decommit, because we're not going to host a committed player. Notre Dame has never had a forced decommitment of a kid that they wanted in their class. What we have said and what we believe to be true, and this is something I had confirmed with a source the other day after all this news broke, is essentially they don't treat him like a committed player in that, and this has been made clear to all the commits, we aren't going to hold that spot for you if you're taking official visits. Notre Dame can't afford to say, hey, listen, we are going to say no to Jameer Joseph or no to a couple other kids that they're recruiting, or, holding off on Jadon Blair, which they never would have done anyway. I'm just making an example. Because we're waiting on you. I don't believe they're going to do that if he's going to continue to take visits. So there isn't this whole force him to decommit thing. Now, they may tell him, hey, we're moving on, and then he will choose to obviously decommit. But even in the past, there's been kids who stayed committed for a while knowing that they weren't going to be in the class. And obviously before Brian Kelly's or before Marcus Freeman's tenure, if you guys remember, there was an offensive lineman that they let, I think it was Greg Crippen, that they let stay committed until he found a new school, even though they told him, you're not coming here. And so he didn't do a public decommitment. So I just don't put a whole lot of stock into, just being a situation where they're going to force him to decommit. Now, having said that, my opinion of how they should handle the situation is if he doesn't recommit to Notre Dame after this weekend, if he's not willing to shut things down, then Notre Dame needs to be prepared to move on from him. Not so much that they stop recruiting him. There's no reason to stop recruiting a kid like Ivan Taylor, but essentially move on, because you're like, look, the odds of this kid coming here are slim. I mean, look, yes, Notre Dame is recruiting at a different level, but how often do kids decommit from a school, take visit, and go back to that school? It doesn't happen very often. It's happened a couple times in Notre Dame. Stephon Tuitt not only took visits to Auburn and Georgia Tech, he actually flipped to Georgia Tech for a minute and then came back to Notre Dame. More recently, if you guys remember, I just had a Deion Colsey is a kid who decommitted from Notre Dame, got back into the process, ended up coming back to Notre Dame. But it doesn't happen very often. It's like when the DeCorian Moore, the receiver at LSU, decommitted, and he's like, I'm still going to consider LSU at first, and then before long, LSU wasn't in the picture anymore. That's normally how it happens. So if Ivan Taylor's not willing to shut it down, then the Notre Dame staff has to prepare to move on without him. I'm okay if they want to still recruit him, and they should still recruit him because he's a very talented player. And everything that we've said about him up to this point in time when he was committed is because of what we believe about his talent. It wasn't just because he was committed. So, yes, you continue to recruit a kid like that. You don't move on from a kid like that in the standpoint of you tell him to take a hike without you having options. But at the same time, if Jadon Blair wants to commit and Jameer Joseph wants to commit, and I'm not saying Jameer does, because we have a question about that I'll get to. You just can't say no to those guys now. You can't say no to those players that you think can play for you to wait for Ivan Taylor, because if you tell those guys no and they go somewhere else, and then Ivan eventually commits somewhere else, well, now you're in trouble. Now you are short. And if the staff doesn't think that they can afford to do that, then they should handle it and afford, just move on if that's true. I hope not. So that's kind of where I'm at. So, and I know what some other people are reporting about the NIL. That's not really accurate. There's a misunderstanding of what that means. Notre Dame has not forced kids to decommit. They still have the same policy, but they're not forcing kids to decommit. And the reason that they're more willing to stay in the fight is because of their ability to be competitive in the NIL sphere. So that's where the thing is at. And so, and my other question is I don't really want to spend a lot of time responding to what other people report. So if you want explanations for what they say and do, go ask them. Don't ask me. Tyler Evans with a super chat, and that's not response to you, AST. That's in response to other things being said in the chat. So if you want to know what those people think about things, then go to their shows and ask those people about those things. I'm not saying that to be rude, but I'm not speaking for other people. I'm telling you what's factual. I'm telling you what we're told. You can believe it or not, but we're going to tell you how things are. Tyler Evans with a super chat. Thank you, Tyler. In your opinion, which team this year has the toughest schedule and weakest? I don't know about weakest. I haven't studied all the schedules, to be completely honest with you. But Florida's schedule and Georgia's schedule off the top of my head are two that really stick out to me as just incredibly challenging schedules. And let me go ahead and pull this up here real quick, because Florida's schedule is just ridiculous. So Florida 2024 football schedule. So Florida's schedule this year, they start the season off against Miami at home. Then they have to play Texas A&M at home. Next, Samford's mixed in between. At Mississippi State, home against UCF. So their non-conference is Miami, Samford, and UCF, and at Florida State. That's Florida's non-conference. Miami at home, UCF at home, at Florida State. Then they also have at Tennessee, home against Kentucky, Georgia on a neutral field, at Texas, home against LSU, home against Ole Miss, at Florida State. That's a very, very challenging schedule. Georgia this year starts the season off with Clemson, ends the season with Georgia Tech, and in between they play at Kentucky, at Alabama, home against Auburn, home against Mississippi State, at Texas, Florida on a neutral field, at Ole Miss, and then home against Tennessee. Like, those are two really, really challenging schedules. I mean, just really brutal schedules. And those are ones that are I look at and say, man, those are going to be tough to win all those, right? And that's why I said Georgia could be 10-2 in a top 5 caliber team. I mean, that's just the kind of schedule that they have. It's a really, really tough schedule. Weakest, I'd have to spend some more time on that, Tyler, and look through it. There's teams with weak schedules, and I view weak as relative. Georgia's schedule is probably just on paper is probably tougher than Florida's, but I think Florida's is tougher. I would rank tougher because relative to who Florida is, it's going to be a much, much tougher schedule. So those are teams that I would say, in my view, have the toughest schedules just off the top of my head. And there's a couple others that I'd have to go through. And I know there's at least one Big Ten team, and I forget who it was, who just gets like the murderer's row of the top Big Ten teams. But I have to go through and look that up because I don't remember quite who that is. Fighting Irish Mike with a super chat. Thank you, Fighting Irish Mike, or Fighting Mike 87. What trio do you think will total more receptions in 2024? The Jadens, that would be Jaden Harrison, Jaden Thomas, and Jaden Greathouse, or the combination of Jordan Faison, Mitchell Evans, and Jeremiah Love? That is a good one, because I could see a scenario in which Jaden Thomas and Jaden Greathouse are 1 and 2 in some order in catches this season, but I could see a scenario where Faison and Evans aren't far behind, and Jeremiah Love has a lot more catches than Jaden Harrison. So that's an interesting one. I'm going to go, and there's injury history in both of them. So I'm going to go in that scenario with the latter. I'm going to go with Jordan Faison, Mitchell Evans, and Jeremiah Love. The reason I say that is for what I mentioned earlier. Jaden Thomas has to prove to me he can be healthy for an entire season, as does Mitchell Evans. It's a little bit of a wash, but I think Jaden's going to catch a lot of balls. I think Jaden Greathouse is going to be Notre Dame's best receiver. I don't think Jordan Faison and Mitchell Evans are going to be very far behind them, and I just think that Jeremiah Love's probably going to catch the ball a lot more than Jaden Harrison. So I could be completely wrong on that, but that's just how I see the situation right now. It's a good question. Good question, Mike. Gregory Perez with a super chat. Thank you, sir. Do you believe that Notre Dame's route to a national championship is to get the 5 seed, or do you believe they just need to get in? Not saying the schedule is easy, but it's hard for me to see them win if they can't beat the best teams on this schedule. Well, I mean, Gregory, there's all types of directions this season could go. I mean, they could lose a game or two here and there, get a lower seed because they were missing their quarterback or had some injury situations, or maybe they don't start the season well, or there's all types of different things that could happen that would allow them to maybe not be seated as high. Maybe their schedule isn't as tough and they run the schedule on the table and they get a lower seed. I mean, to me, Notre Dame's best path to the championship is how can you get the momentum going as early as possible in the playoff? And that is to have a higher seed. And so 5 or 6 is really where Notre Dame wants to be. Because if Notre Dame is good enough to get a 5 or 6 seed, it means they're a top 5 team. 1 and 2 are going to probably be the Big Ten champ and the SEC champ, most likely. And so if you're sitting there as the 5 seed, then you're getting either the ACC champ or even more likely the Big 12 champ, and maybe outside chance that it's a group of 5 champs. So let's just say the Big 12 kind of eats itself, which is possible because I love the depth of the Big 12. We'll dive into more of that later. Not so much depth from you take their 8 against anyone else's 8, but more of there's not any like elite team in the Big 12, and there's a lot of quality teams in the Big 12, and they could maybe eat themselves a little bit. Well, let's say Memphis runs the table, or a buddy of mine texted me last night, and he's talking about he thinks UTSA is going to win the AAC. That's his sleeper pick. Well, let's say UTSA goes 11-1 this year, and the Big 12 winner and then they win the AAC championship, so they're 12-1. And then the Big 12 champ is a 3-loss team, or maybe the 2-loss number 1 seed gets beat by a 3 or 4-loss number 2 seed in the Big 12. That's not out of the realm of possibility. Now, all of a sudden, Notre Dame's first round game would be against that 4-loss Big 12 team potentially. Then their second round game as the 5 seed would be against the AAC team. So, no, that's not a really tough path. But what that does is allows you to get some momentum going into the semis, where you then would have to beat a better team. If they're the 6 seed, you're playing a 3 seed, which is either the Big 12 champ or is, I think based on how I see the season going, the ACC champ, which could potentially be a rematch against Florida State. It could potentially be a game against Clemson. It could potentially be a game against Miami. And so 5 and 6 seeds both have a chance to give Notre Dame a much easier path to getting to the semis than being a 7 or 8, where you're most likely going to have to play, number one, a better team in the first round, because the lower seed you are, the higher seed, the better team you're going to play. And then the second part of it is you're now going to play the 1 or 2 seed. And obviously that's a little bit tougher. Now, eventually you're going to have to beat a 1 or a 2 seed, right? Most likely. But I like the idea of getting a couple games under your belt first to build some momentum, then taking on those 2 teams in the semis and quarters. I do think that's the best path. Now, can Notre Dame still win a championship as a 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 seed? Certainly. If they get hot, certainly. But the path is easier if it's a 5 or 6. Now, the flip side is, let's say Notre Dame stubs their toe a couple times and they're the 11 seed or the 12 seed, but they're right going into the playoff. They're healthy, they got everybody back, and they're the team that they should have been as a 5 or 6 seed. It does kind of have the same kind of format. You'd have to beat a much tougher team in round 1, but then you would be on path to play a team that, and you'd have to go on the road, but then you'd have a much better path to winning that second round game. So it's not ideal to be 11 or 12, but if they're able to win that 11-12 game, that would give them a chance to have a better matchup in round 2 to get to the semis. But yes, the best path is to be a 5 or 6 seed, in my opinion. And depending on who the ACC champ is, I don't love the idea of a rematch against Florida State, at the Orange Bowl or something like that. So that wouldn't necessarily be an ideal situation. Rematches are hard, and if you beat them at home, it's going to be tougher to beat them on the road. Clemson will be a good matchup tough matchup for Notre Dame. Wouldn't mind seeing that game. And then if Miami's that 3 seed, that means all that talent came together, and that'll be a tough game too. But those are games Notre Dame should have a shot to win. If they're the team that we think they are. If they're a 5 or 6 seed, then they should be able to win that kind of game. Got another super chat from AST12321, and this is going to end the super chat. So we'll jump back up top here after this one. So thank you for this. Who do you consider to have the highest ceiling on the team on each side of the ball relative to their position without accounting for positional value? That is a good question. Who do I think has the highest ceiling on the team on both sides of the ball? Defensively, that answer to me is a little bit easier. It's Bryce Young. That's my answer on defense. I think he's probably got the highest ceiling of anyone on defense. You could maybe look at one of the linebackers, maybe look at Christian Gray, maybe look at, Boubacar Traore, maybe Armo Mukum. But for me, it's Bryce. I think Bryce has the highest ceiling on defense. Offensively, that's a little bit of a tougher question to ask, because I'm trying to think about Gerby is in the conversation, Jagasol's in the conversation, CJ Carr's in the conversation, Cam Williams is in the conversation, Eli Raridan is in the conversation to get healthy. Those would be the guys that I would look at and say would be in my conversation. I don't know that of those guys. I don't know that I know who I would say is the highest upside. Maybe Gerby, maybe Cam Williams. Those would be one. Maybe CJ. Those would be my picks for that one. All right. So we are through with the super chats. So it is time to get back up to the top and let's get rocking and rolling. We had Brandon K jumped in there really early, about an hour and a half before the show started. So I appreciate you getting in there, Brandon. And his question is, if each major conference had to be renamed with a corporate sponsor, who would you pick for each conference? For those who aren't sure what the heck Brandon's talking about, there's the report out yesterday that the Big 12 is going to be renamed, and it's going to be, I think, Allstate, I think, is the sponsor. So it'd be like the Allstate Big 12, or maybe even the Allstate, whatever number of the conference is, or just naming it something different. Um, so, you know, I think I saw Conference USA doing the same thing. I don't even know, man. Like Big Ten, who would be the sponsor for the Big Ten? I don't know. I'm not that creative. I'm not like, I'm trying to think of like something snarky, but I can't think of this. I saw something on Twitter yesterday I thought was great, and I'll steal this one, flat out steal this one. Some guy put out, he's like talking about the Big 12, the new Big 12, right? And he said something along the lines of it was Southwest Airlines sponsors the Big 12 and turns it into the Southwest Conference. Like, hello, been there, done that. A lot of these teams are Southwest teams, so that would make a lot of sense. I thought that was pretty creative. I'm just not that creative, to be completely honest with you, to be able to look at it and say, hey, I got this really, this really good name. Some of y'all in the chat have much better access to that is me. Eric Santini said Bucky's for the Sun Belt. I like that. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. And somebody said too, it's better than getting private equity firms involved. I would agree with that, Raymond. The problem is they're talking about doing both, and I think that would be a disaster. I think that would be a really, really bad idea. But that's unfortunately where a lot of people are going. So I wish I was more creative, Brandon. I do. I just can't think of. I'm just not that creative to think about that. And I can say, okay, what big companies are in these parts, and I'm just not that creative. So I would hope that the leagues would keep their same names, but it's most likely going to be like the bowl games and be a situation where it'll be like the whatever corporate sponsor Orange Bowl is most likely what I think it's going to go. So sorry about that, Brandon. Wish I was a little bit more creative. Brandon asks, where do you see IB in 5 years and 10 years? Well, in 5 to 10 years, my hope is that we're just a bigger, better version of ourselves. We'll always be evolving to the different, technological advances and different platforms that maybe we can get ourselves on that fit my vision for what we are. So, there's some platforms that I choose not to go on because they're not really about, like Instagram. I've thought about doing Instagram, and I still may hire someone to run our Instagram account, or if someone wants to do it, they can do it. But the problem is that's just not really about engagement, the kind of engagement that I want, which is, talking ball and, getting people to read the articles and engage in our stuff. It's just more about, okay, lots of views and lots of follows. And that's just not, I'm not one of those people that's like out there begging for followers. I don't really care about what my number, couldn't even tell you right now what my Twitter follower number is. I don't really care. I don't look at how many likes my stories get. I probably should. I just don't. It's not the kind of feedback that I care about. If people are clicking on the articles and engaging the articles and signing up for the message board and talking ball with me, that's the kind of stuff I'm looking for. Always looking for different ways to get our to expand our brand. Got a couple things that I'm working on now in hopes that we can kind of get rolling. But I just think it's a bigger, better version of ourselves. I mean, for me personally, what I'd like my role to be is I would like to get to the point where I'm writing less articles and focusing more time on producing shows, producing film breakdowns, producing, intel for the message board. Like, I would like my work to be more message board related for the premium members, and then having people that I hire to write the front page articles and do some of those things, and hopefully someday have, more hosts that can do things and be able to do more than what we have right now. And we're just not there yet. Where we were getting there, and then some things happened that were outside of our control that caused us to have to reshift a little bit. And so hopefully we'll get back to that. But that's why the message board is so important, because that's the one thing that we can kind of control to a degree. With how that goes, we're not beholden to advertising changes or other companies changing how they count downloads, which just cut our revenue and our podcast platform in half. It has nothing to do with us. We're still putting out the same number of shows, but Apple makes this change, and then boom, our numbers cut in half, our revenues cut in half, and we're always going to be beholden to that to some degree. So the whole thing that I want to do is the reason for the premium membership is because that allows us to have some level of stability. But we're not anywhere close to having the number of subscribers that we would need to be able to go out and grow the way that I want to grow in that regard. So, and it's hard to hire people that aren't full-time. I only have one guy that's full-time employee. That's Ryan. Everybody else is kind of paid on a rev share. And, because I could say, hey, I'm going to pay you X amount of dollars, but then all of a sudden things like happen, SI does what they do. And so I leave them, and then this thing with Apple, and all of a sudden I'm like, I don't have the money to pay you. And we've never gone in debt at Irish Breakdown. I've never been a penny in debt, and it's going to stay that way. And so we have to do it the way that we're doing it. But my hope would be that we can grow and get bigger and have more people writing for us, and more full-time people, more contractors, and that we can continue to expand the things we do, like I said. And that would allow me to take more time away from having to produce a bunch of front page content and allow me to focus on some other areas. And that would be my goal. And just, keep doing what we're doing and growing and providing a community where people can talk football and people can be friends and people can communicate and people can, like the whole IB Nation thing is something that I really take a lot of pride in. Number one, it wasn't my name, and you guys came up with that. And it's a situation where it's like, I was having a meeting with somebody the other day, and they were talking about wanting to have us do some things with them, and well, we'd have to change our format. And I said, I don't really want to change our format. I like what we're doing, because we can have some people, come in and say, hey, we had one of our longtime listeners lost his father last week, and he has a place to go of people that he knows that he can relate to, that he can say, hey, look, here's what I'm going through. Can you guys pray for me? And we can do that. And those things are as valuable to me, if not more so, than, hey, we have X number of followers and X number of subscribers and stuff like that. It's the community part. And that's the stuff that I drive through. Like, I get emails from people saying, hey, you know what? I watch games better now because of you guys. I enjoy watching football now more. I understand it more. I've learned more about the game. Like, those are things I love that may mean more to me than, hey, guess how many subscribers I have. I don't care about that dopamine hit. It just doesn't drive me. It doesn't fuel me. It's, are we making a difference in people's lives? And we're not doing like medicine and things like that. But we're making an impact in people's lives because we're giving them a community to be a part of. We're helping them learn the game more. We're giving them ability to fellowship and to communicate and with like-minded people. And we can put, look, guy, hey, I hate to break it to you, but everybody in the chat's not a Republican or a Democrat or an independent or thinks the same thing about this political topic or this cultural topic. But you know what? This is a place that we can put all that stuff aside and say we have one thing in common. We love Notre Dame football, and that brings us together. And so you got people on the left praying for people on the right, and people on the right praying for people on the left, because we don't bring that stuff into this. We have something that we can rally around. And I love that platform. And that's one of the reasons that we do the things that we do, and we do things the way that we do them, because it's a unifying thing. And I want to be a unifier, not get into the nonsense that divides people and creates such division and hate and things like that. And there's that in Notre Dame spheres. Trust me on that. There's some people you can talk to, and you bring up my name, and they're going to just go off on some weird tangent, and you can tell they're in their feelings about it. But I don't care about all that. I care about the people that are here. And my goal is always going to be to say, what can we do to make that experience better for our people? And that's ultimately my goal. How that looks, it's going to evolve and change. And my vision for what we are in 5 or 10 years, I have to have one, but I also have to have the ability to adapt to changing times. And I hope that I'm always able to do that. And I haven't got burned out yet, and I hope that never happens because I really do love what I do. I really do. Got a couple super chats popped in. Iden Banami says, "Who are your best in-game coaches?" That's a good question. Best in-game coaches. I think Dabo's a pretty good in-game coach. So he'd be one in the ACC that pops in my head. SEC, I think Lane Kiffin's a pretty in-game play caller. Steve Sarkisian's a pretty in-game play caller. As far as head coaches, I don't know if either of them are. Kirby has become one to a degree. He used to be not a very good in-game coach, but he's gotten better. It helps when you have better players than everybody else. I mean, Chris Kleiman's one. Lance Leopold's a great in-game coach from Kansas. Great in-game coach. Kalen DeBoer's a really good in-game coach, not just with play calling, but just decisions that they make and things that they do that I tend to like quite a bit. He's another one that pops off the top of my head. Did I say Chris Kleiman from K-State? Kyle Whittingham's a really good in-game coach, in my opinion, with the things that they do. He's really smart with, he has a philosophy of we're going to be ball control and be mistake-free, and he really understands that and how to maximize that, but he also has a willingness to take chances when it's right and strategic and smart. And, I think he's another one. So those are some guys that just off the top of my head, that pop in my head. I mean, Jim Harbaugh was one, but he's obviously not in college football anymore, but he was one. Jonathan Smith is a good one from Oregon State. I think he's a good in-game coach. Those are guys just off the top of my head kind of come out to me as like, oh, when I think of, okay, good in-game coaches, it's that group of guys. So good question. AST 12321 with the super chat. Thank you very, very much for that. His super chat this person's super chat is, if Leonard gets hurt right before halftime at A&M and CJ Carr takes over for the rest of the season, do we win there and do we win a playoff game? Yeah, I still think Notre Dame is good enough to beat A&M with CJ playing. I think that you look at their schedule. I mean, we talked about this yesterday. Vince and I did. Notre Dame is still a team capable of going 10-2 minimum with all four of their quarterbacks. And if CJ gets thrust into the lineup that early, they'd have to hold on to beat A&M. But even if they don't, for example, you're still in a situation where he now gets 3 kind of get-right games under his belt against Northern Illinois, then Purdue, and then Miami of Ohio. That would allow him to kind of get comfortable before the schedule ramps up again against Louisville. Then he's got Stanford coming up. So, yeah, I think by the time you get to the postseason, Notre Dame could be 11-1 and in the playoff and have a home seed that they could win. Sure. Am I going to guarantee it? No, I'm not guaranteeing it because he's a freshman, and that would be putting way too much on him. But can they do it? Sure. Am I going to say that they will, which is kind of what your question is getting at? Like, will they? That I'm not willing to guarantee just yet. So I'd have to see that one. I'd have to see how CJ plays, but he's certainly capable of leading them to that type of success. I think all these kids are capable of leading to this team to the playoff. And the reason I say that is because of what's around them. Like you go to the next 3 games, you don't have to lean on CJ to carry the team the way that you needed Sam Hartman to carry the team last year, or Jack Cohn to carry the team in 2021, or even Kyron to carry the team in 2021 as well in the run game, where he just had to do things where it's like, well, O-line's not blocking anybody, so I got to go do something crazy. And, you think of that touchdown run against North Carolina. So I just don't think that they would need to rely on him as much. And by the time that they would need to rely on him more, he'd have 7-8 starts under his belt. So they could be a playoff team and win a playoff game, yeah. I don't know that they can go much deeper than that with a true freshman at quarterback, to be honest with you, unless the O-line just makes a big stride, really big stride. The other part, too, about that question is, if CJ's the one that goes in the game, it means CJ made a big jump in fall camp and beat out Steve and Kenny quickly, which means CJ would be more ready to thrive. So there's that aspect of it as well. Okay, let's go back to the top. Got the super chats out of the way. We got one from Michael Collins. He says, do NIL deals have performance-based escalators, AA, All-Americans, Heisman's, yards? If so, do you think that will, 1, impact load management for stats, and 2, widen the field for who might earn All-American honors if stars sit more? Michael, I don't know that that's happening. It wouldn't surprise me. Um, like I don't I don't know if that's happening or not, honestly. And if it was, I mean, look, if you're a coach, you can't worry about that. That's not your concern. My job is to win a football game. My job is to win championships. Now, if you're in a situation where, you're going into the last game, you're playing some team that's not good, you leave your starting running back in because he's got to get to 1,200 yards, get the escalator, you're trying to do right by him, and then he gets hurt. No one's going to be like, well, it's sorry that you didn't achieve your goals as a team this year. At least you did the right thing for that player. Nope. It's going to be you screwed up and, now you're out of a job because your team didn't maximize their potential. So I just don't think you can get into those situations where you're worrying too much about that. You've got to go out there and win games and prepare your team each week to go out there and make a run. That's what your focus has to be. Wyatt Kerwin with a question. He says, you're the head coach of a top FCS program. So that's 1AA. Example, James Madison, competing for national titles annually. FBS is more money, but no real chance for national titles. If the school is doing well financially, would you move to the FBS? Well, number one, as the head football coach, I have no say at all in whether we go to the FBS or not. I mean, that's the reality of it. So if I'm the president, right, maybe, or the board, the AD, that those people that actually have a say in those decisions, if the school's doing well financially, would you move to FBS? My answer to that would be probably yes, because if the school is doing well financially, it means we're going to then benefit even greater from the financial boost that would come by going to a Division I level. The problem with some of these schools is so many schools are not run well and they're not successful financially, that they kind of need that to have that money grab. But if I'm in a school, let's say I'm the president of James Madison, and I'm looking back a couple of years ago when they made that decision and saying, listen, am I going to what am I going to factor into that? Okay, well, we're doing well financially as an institution. We have a very good recruiting base that should allow us to thrive. We think we can be more competitive on that stage, and potentially with a bigger stage, with a bigger platform, with more revenue, we can build up our facilities and get to the point where maybe we can challenge, those teams and be a Boise State type of team. There's a lot of attractiveness to that, honestly. And so, no, maybe you don't win championships. Conference and national championships, but you still have a chance to win national or conference championships. And you're giving your players an even bigger stage to play on, and more revenue for your coaches and your program and all that. So you'd have to think strongly about it if you are doing well financially. Because, again, if you're doing well financially, then a lot of that money you're now getting from being a Division I team, you can now reinvest into your program and make it better and better and better. Then the final piece is, okay, can we be competitive on that level? If I'm Montana, chances are no. It's just going to be hard for Montana, in my opinion, to compete at that level. Maybe North Dakota State, but some of the schools that I think could thrive are like a JMU, who's in a pretty good recruiting area right there in the middle of Virginia. You've got the Northeast, you've got the South, you've got, Tennessee right over there. That's a good place to be able to recruit from. Pennsylvania's not too far away. So that's a pretty good recruiting base. Other places is a little tougher to kind of have that level of success. And so I just think it depends on each school, but you have to at least consider it. And I get the part that you said, no national championships. I get that, but you have to consider it. You have to at least consider it. Aiden Benami asks, what do you think about the Big 12 selling their naming rights? So this is what we're referring to earlier. I mean, look, they're going to have to do it. If the way that the system is now, with the SEC and Big Ten getting so much bigger TV deals in those schools, they have to look for ways to increase revenue. They do. And these type of things are not going to get them on the same level as those teams, but it helps. So I can think the thing I saw, I've seen different numbers floated around. I think the most recent one I saw, or it's not the most recent, but the biggest one I saw was like 50 million. And what's the Big 12 at right now? Are they at 16 teams? Or are they at 18 teams? Let me go look real quick. Where's the Big 12 at right now? Are they at 16 teams? So I believe they're at 16 teams right now, right? Hold on 1 second. Let me just look this up real quick, y'all. Big 12 football 2024. So let me just go ahead and look this up real quick. So you've got the Big 12 is now at 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 16 teams. So if you look at 50 million, divide that by 16 teams, you're talking about an extra $3 million a year per team. That helps, right? That helps. It doesn't get you like, hey, now we compete with the SEC and the Big 12, but it helps. It supplements. And so, I mean, as long as it's a pure sponsorship and they're not trying to then jump in and say, hey, we're going to make you do this and make you do that, which is why I think the equity way is so dangerous. Oh, okay. I would just be careful about getting a partner that's going to want you to just completely get rid of who you are and your brand. You know, it's like if somebody came in and say, hey, Brian, we want to invest in Irish Breakdown, but we want you to rename the company and we want you to do this, we want you to do that, and then we'll give you, $5 million. I'd be like, no, because you're kind of killing who we are. I mean, that name is that's who we are. And this is what our brand is, and this is what we do. And so, to me, that stuff still matters. But if it just, and for $3 million a team, it's not worth just becoming the All-State 16 or something like that. That just is, I don't know. It's just so lame. It's so lame. Now, if you want to say it's the All-State Big 16 or the Big 12, okay, fine, whatever. It's like the Orange Bowl, and everyone's going to still call it the Big 12 or whatever. I mean, if it's like, the I don't know, the Ford Big 10. I don't know. There used to be like a lot of Ford factories in the Big 10 country. The Ford Big 10. People are going to still call it the Big 10, but at least now they have a sponsor that's giving them more money. So, I mean, I understand it. I think all of this sucks, to be honest with you, but I get it. It's just what they have to do to compete financially at this point in time. That's why I wish, perfect world, one of the things that I wish would happen is that all FBS Power 5 programs kind of, I mean, it can't happen because of the way the laws are right now, but if there was a way to have a law to where, or make the rule and have it backed by law to say, look, however, all the money that's being made on TV deals, ESPN can pay more to host all the SEC schools. That's fine. All their games are on ESPN. That money's going into the pot. The Big Ten money's going in the pot. So all these TV companies can bid for who they're going to have, but that money goes into a pot and it gets distributed evenly to the Power Fives. That would be the only way that you can make this make any sense, in my opinion. And that's just not going to happen until something like that happens. Schools, conferences like this, conferences like the ACC are going to have to do things like this to try to get more money. It's just the way that it is. Aiden Benami also asks, give me RJ Oben and Josh Burnham on both, or says, this is a statement, give me Josh Burnham and RJ Oben on both sides on third down. Yeah, possibly. I could even see a scenario where maybe RJ's inside in that scenario, and you've got Boubacar and Josh Burnham on both sides, or one of those two guys and Jalen Sneed on opposite sides. So I think there's a lot of good options for that, in my opinion. A lot of good options for that. John A1 says, now that Mike Denbrock will bring the offense to more of a zone run scheme, will the pin and pull wrinkles that Joe Rudolph likes be used? And if used, be more effective? That's a great question, John. And yes, they will still be used. I mean, if you go break down Mike Denbrock's offense at LSU and Cincinnati, they were used. Especially, they would run power at Cincinnati. They would run buck sweep at Cincinnati. They were a little bit more zone dominant and duo dominant at LSU, but at Cincinnati, they were more diverse. And in Notre Dame, they would run counter and run some of that stuff as well. So we'll still see some of that pin and pull stuff. We'll still see some gap scheme as well. Power's more of a gap scheme, not a pin and pull scheme. But we'll still see more of that as wrinkles. And then as a wrinkle, I do think it's more effective. I mean, you go back and look at Notre Dame in 2017, for example, with Coach Easton and Chip Long. Heavy inside zone, outside zone team. Heavy. But some of the biggest runs that year were gap schemes and pin and pull schemes. I mean, they had I think it's about a 74-yard touchdown run against North Carolina to the left on a buck sweep play. They had I think it was about a 59-yard touchdown run against Miami of Ohio on a buck sweep to the right with Josh Adams. They had in 2015, similar concept with Mike Denbrock. If you remember, one of the longest runs of the season was a 91-yard touchdown run by CJ Prosise against Georgia Tech on a counter play. It's a gap scheme, even though they were a heavy inside-outside zone team. So what I think those things serve as good complements to that, because if all the things you have to do to be good against the zone, those things can be bigger plays. What I don't and look, you can major in pin and pull stuff. Teams do it and run the ball well. I just don't think Notre Dame had the personnel to do it last year. So my issue wasn't so much, oh, you can't be pin and pull. I'm a zone guy. Y'all know that. But that's a personal preference. It doesn't mean it's the only way to be successful or the only way to be successful at Notre Dame. It's you have to recruit to that. And I don't think they had an offensive line that was really built for that. They have some players on the team now that in 3-4 years say, they could do a lot of pin and pull stuff and be effective. I just don't think that's who they were in 2023. But if Mike Denbrock's going to be a zone guy, you still need some of that stuff as a complement, right? And now it's not needed as much now as it was 10 years ago, 15, 20 years ago because of the RPO stuff, because now you can use the RPO game as your counter to attack teams. So, like, what I mean by counter is we're going to run inside zone out of, deuce formation. So for me, deuce formation is 2 receivers to the left or right, but 2 receivers to one side, a tight end, and then another receiver to another side. So it's a 2x2 formation, 11 personnel. I'm going to run inside zone out of that. And depending on how the front is and do some different things out of that. Well, you have to defend me a certain way. There's going to be things that you're going to do to defend me, including, getting extra guys in the box, whether it's to bring the overhang inside more or to maybe bring a safety down. There's going to be things you're going to do to defend me. I need answers. And I'm hoping that I can catch you doing this because you think zone is coming, and then I catch you and we're doing this other thing, and it goes for a big play. So you're loading the box because you think inside zone's coming, and we hit them with a buck sweep concept or a G scheme concept like Chip Long used to like to do as a compliment. And all of a sudden, you catch that sucker right, and you're gone because they're coming here and you're going there. And but now you've got a lot of RPO options for that. So if they're going to bring those things down, we can bring a glance behind that safety coming down. If they're going to walk the overhang, we've got some pass game concepts outside that we can use. If they're going to condense the box, we can come out and offensively as an offensive coach and do some quick perimeter screen type stuff to impact that. So there's more answers than just, okay, you do this, we're going to run our counter play, or we're going to run our power play or our buck sweep play or our G scheme play or whatever the case may be. You now have some pass game answers to that. So you can just be more stick to your bread and butter runs. But I still feel like when you're a team like Notre Dame, there's still a great need to have those complementary run concepts to really keep teams honest at one part. But the bigger thing is not so much to keep teams honest as much as this to create big play opportunities for yourself and create some big play opportunities. So I want to push back on something else. Andrew Gilmore says, my only pushback is that the Big 12 is a fairly new conference with less history. It would be tragic if the SEC and Big 10 was renamed. No, that's not true at all. The Big 12 has been around for a long time. It's just changed its name from the time as they've added more teams. It used to be the Big 8. The Big 12's been around longer than you and I have been alive. So that's not really accurate. The Big 12, as it stands now, was founded in 1994, but it's the Big 8 conference, basically. And so the tradition goes back much, much further than just the 1994. So I disagree with that sentiment that it's a newer conference. And I mean, I don't agree with that sentiment. So no, it's not a new conference. All right, let's get to some more questions. We have one from ND Milton fan. Number one, which walk-on turned scholarship player has the biggest impact this year? And two, most impactful walk-on you can recall. I mean, let's see here. I mean, Shane Walton, would be the one that I can think of. I mean, I don't think he was still a walk-on when he became an All-American, but he started his career as a walk-on. I'm pretty sure. Some of you can correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't Shane Walton originally a walk-on? Right? Wasn't he a walk-on? I believe he was. So, yeah, I believe he was. So somebody can correct me if I'm wrong on that one. But so we'll have to. Which impact this year? Which walk-on turned scholarship player will have the biggest impact this year? It's Jordan Faison or Luke Talich, whoever gets the most opportunities. I mean, that would be my thought process. It'd be one of those two teams. So yeah, that's where I would say. And then Andrew, you're also incorrect. You say all of the original main members of the Southwest and Big Eight are gone. Again, also not correct. Kansas joined that league in 1907. Iowa State joined it in 1908. Kansas State joined it in 1913. Those teams are still there. Oklahoma State joined it in 1958. Colorado joined it in 1947. They're actually coming back. Colorado was a member of the Big Eight, and they're now coming back. So again, that's not accurate. So the Big 12 was the Big Eight survived. The Southwest went away. They brought Southwest teams into their league, and the Big 12 did what the Pac-12 has done, which is as they add more teams, they change the name. The Pac-12 used to be the Pac-8, used to be the Pac-10. It's still the same conference. They just added teams. The Big 8 went to Big 12 because they benefited from the Southwest Conference going away. It was not a new league that, it was the Big 12 adopted those teams. So, but he says, I'm talking about teams that matter. That's your problem right there, Andrew, is you have this thing of this team matters and these teams don't. I don't care about this team. I don't care about Notre Dame unless they're playing this team. You may not matter, but you said, your comment was this. You said all of the teams are gone. All of the original main members of the Southwest and Big Eight are gone. I just named half of the Big Eight teams that are still there. And you're saying, well, no, but they don't matter. That's nonsense. The league is not new. It's not new. You can talk yourself through whatever you want to talk yourself through, but it's not a new league. It's been around since before my father was born. It's not a new league. It's not a new league. You said it's a new league. It's not a new league. So you can do whatever mental gymnastics you want to do after that. It's not a new league. It's not a new league. John A1, now that Mike Denbrock will bring the offense to more of a zone run scheme. We already answered that one. Let's go to Garen Knutson. O-line talk. If the O-line plays just slightly better than expected, what skill group position benefits the most? Quarterbacks. And I know might want to say running backs because for obvious reasons, but I think it's quarterbacks because if the O-line plays slightly better than expected, it means they'll be better protecting the quarterback. And that to me is the biggest issue that this offensive line had last year. The run game was inconsistent at times, but it also had some very, very good moments last year. Pass pro was a problem, a big chunk of the year. That was a problem. I mean, yeah, obviously Joe Alt was great, but especially up the middle and then just the inconsistency at right tackle, pass pro. So really good question, Garen. And I think it comes down to the fact that you have to get better at protecting. You want to get your pass game better, protect the quarterback better. I could go through, even with all the issues of the O-line last year, even with all their issues, I could point to you 5-6 plays a game where all the issues with the receivers last year. And I said this at the time. I could give you 5-6 times a game minimum where receivers were getting open for potential big play opportunities. And I'm talking about against Clemson, against Ohio State, against Louisville, against Duke. and either Hartman didn't read it and a lot of times didn't have time to read it. And then as the season wore on and the pass pro became more and more inconsistent, he then was less willing to go to those secondary reads. He would just lock in on guys and get the ball out because he was getting hit so much. So I think you improve the pass pro just that alone. If the only thing that changed from last year to this year is better pass pro, I think the pass game just by that alone would get a lot better. And so I think the quarterback benefits from it. And then, of course, uniquely to this season, obviously, then that would also create some run game opportunities as well. Aiden Banami asks, do you guys still like conference championship games now that there being no divisions anymore? And how many teams potentially playing two times in back-to-back weekends? So, Aiden, if we're just talking about football, no, I don't see any use for the conference championships anymore. I don't. I mean, when you have this many teams, right? So, like the Big Ten has, 18 teams now? Is the Big Ten up to 18 teams now, right? And they play 9 conference games. So that means you're barely playing over half the teams. Now, obviously, there's 18 teams. You play 9, but you don't count yourself as the other 9. You can't. There's no option to play yourself. So there's 17 teams you could play. You play 9 of them. That's just over half the teams. It's hard to get a good read on who the best team is in when you're doing that. So the whole conference championship thing to me doesn't matter as much. Because there's so many things that go into it. This team had an easier schedule. This team had a harder schedule. There's all these different aspects, that go into just what type of team you have. I mean, you could have 2 teams playing for the conference championship that don't really, they're not the best teams. I mean, the importance of it just to me is it's just not the same. It's not the same. So I don't see any point in it. There's not going to be the same type of rivalries that there were when they were in the East and the West and all those type of things. And now that you've got to win 3-4 more games in the postseason, I just don't see how there's any value in that. I don't see any value in that. So, when I look at the conference championship games now, there's only one reason for them now, and that's to make money. There's no other reason to have conference championship games now in this current format than it's just to make money. That's really the only reason. It's just to make money. So, when I think about the way to do it, it's like, okay, just kind of go back to the way it was before, in basketball, where your regular season champ gets your automatic bid in the and then you have build your tiebreakers in and all this other kind of stuff and go from there. Because like you said, it's kind of like, you remember in 2011 when it was like LSU beat Bama in the regular season at Bama. And then they went out and won the conference championship and then had to play a rematch against LSU against Bama in the championship game, national championship game. And Bama beat them. Well, Bama's the national champion. Well, why? Like they shouldn't have been on that stage anyway, because you didn't win your regular season championship. Bama didn't even get a play in the conference title game. So it's just like, when you're talking about good teams, it's hard to win rematches, and you're punishing the team that handled business during the season by then, potentially having to play in a rematch. So let's say last year Michigan goes out and beats Ohio State in the Big Ten in the last game of the regular season. And then they get a rematch a week later on a neutral field. So let's go 2 years ago. Ohio State and Michigan playing for the last game of regular season, and Michigan wins, beats Ohio State soundly in Columbus. But because there's no divisions, those are still the 2 best teams in the Big Ten. They play a game again a week later on a neutral field, and now this time Ohio State wins. How's that fair for Michigan? Right? We went to your place and beat you. Now we got to beat you again a week later on a neutral field. Like, now you're the conference champions. No, I don't like that at all. I don't like that at all. I would do away with that if I could. I'm not a big fan of that. I'm not a big fan of that at all. So I would pass on that. I would absolutely pass on that. for sure. I don't see any value in that. All right. Let's go to the next question and let's go down and get somebody we haven't got yet. Coach Bent 574. Whose post Notre Dame career would you rather have? Jack Cohn, professional non-football, or Michael Deeb, Savannah Bananas? I have no clue what you're talking about. What's a Savannah Banana? I don't know what that is. So is that weird baseball team that like sings and dances or something? Like, I think I might have seen some. Whose career would I rather have? Jack Cohn's. Just go on my life and get married and be around my family. So as opposed to, I don't know what that is, but yeah, somebody said the Globetrotters for baseball, so they go all around the country. No. I doubt that they'd be paying me enough money to make me happy doing that. Sometimes it's okay to just leave sports behind and say, look, I'm gonna go do something different in my life. So good for Michael Deeb if that's what he wants to do. But for me, I would want to do that because at the end of the day, it's about what makes you happy. Maybe Michael Deeb and the guys on that team they have no desire to settle down and just live a normal life. That's fine. Good for you. You do you. For me, that's not for me. So is that the black light baseball? I don't know what that means, but that sounds kind of weird. Now I'm somewhat intrigued. So yeah, I would much rather have a normal job for me. So that's what I would rather do. We have a super chat down here. Thank you for the question, Coach Bent. I just wasn't sure what that is, what that was, but people confirm my suspicion. Steve Rolfe with a super chat. Thank you, Steve. If the wide receiver class is John Anthony Hall, Elijah Burris, Jerome Bettis, and Dylan Robinson, are you happy with it? And is there enough diversity in their traits as a class? So, Steve, I am happy with it. It's a good receiver class. If you take out any other context, if you just look at it for the players that they would land, in my view, that's two top 150 players in Robinson and Hall. I have Burris as a top 250 player right now because he's coming off the injury and has a lot to prove. If he makes the jump, I think he's going to make. He might jump into the 150 for me. And then Bettis, who's a good depth guy, good team guy, has some size, maybe he grows into something else. That's a good class. And you're getting another pure outside guy in Dylan Robinson. You're getting Burris and Bettis who can do both, play outside and inside. You've got some upside. You've got some really good route runners in Hall and Burris. You've got more of a vertically oriented player in Robinson. So yeah, I like the uniqueness of their skill sets there. Certainly. I would like to have more of a burner, so I would say I wish I would have had a Tanook Hines. That's the value that Derek Meadows could bring, as he's a guy that can be a stretch the field burner. That's a little different than Dylan Robinson, but I'd be happy with that class. Now, if you put it in context and say, did you close the gap with this class? No, you didn't. What you did, however, is you made sure the gap didn't widen, but you didn't close it. You'd need some guys to kind of really get their peak. You need Burris to get to his peak. You need Robinson to get to his peak. You'd maybe need one or two of those guys to outperform what we think their ceiling is. But what this class would do is it would add value to your depth chart on the outside. It would, because you need another year of kind of rebuilding the perimeter, because we talked about before, a lot of slot guys in previous classes. You'd get some bigger bodied guys. You'd get some more depth. You'd get some guys that are, big play, less volume guys, a couple guys that are more volume type guys. You'd have guys that are good route runners, some guys, because there's some uniqueness to it. So in that regard, I think it would be a good addition to the football team. But now you have to go out in 26 and say, okay, now we need some impact guys. Because I don't know if anybody in there is like a true impact guy. I think Dylan Robinson could be. And, we'll see what he can become. I actually think he probably has the highest ceiling of all those players. He could be an impact guy. But your next year, you're going to really need to make sure you get some impact guys. That's going to be the key. So would I be happy with it? Yes. Would I say good enough? No, it's not good enough. if you're putting the context of what Notre Dame needs to do to win a championship. But what I've done is I don't think they've weakened their receiving core with this class. There's some upside there. I just don't think they had that big gap closing class that you maybe hoped that they were going to be able to put together. All right, let's go back up to the top and get some more. I think that's the last super chat for now. Let's go back up to the top and get to John A1. Which player returning from major injury, not named Mitchell Evans, or lost practice time has a chance to get some snaps? He's talking about Aiden Gobira, Ben Minnick. Who would be some other players? So you're talking about that. Which player returned from major injury or lost practice time has a chance to get some snaps? So I mean, you're probably thinking like no to Riley Leonard, no to Mitchell Evans, that type of guy. So who would it be for me? I'm potentially Armel Mukum could potentially be one that I think about at defensive tackle. He's a very talented player. When I think of receiver, Deion Colsey would be one. He's a guy that didn't get a lot of snaps last year and lost a lot of the season because of an injury. He's a guy that I think could have an impact this season. Trying to think of some others. You'd mentioned Minnick and Gobira. I don't think those guys are going to really get major minutes this season. I think it would be kind of the guys that I just mentioned would be the ones off the top of my head that would have the best chance to play this season. All right, let's get down to BK's last brain cell. Over under, Kingston Viliama-Asa and Drake Bowen combined for more than 150 tackles, 12 plus tackles for loss. Secondary accounts for more than 15 turnovers. Over under. Am I taking the over under on that? So on the tackles, so that would have to be an average of 75 between the two. Or let's say Drake gets 100, Kingston would need 50. I'm going to go under on that. 12 tackles for loss, I'm going over on that because I could see Kingston as a rotation guy having 40 tackles and 4 tackles for loss, 4.5 tackles for loss, and then Drake as a starter having 90 tackles and like 8.5 tackles for loss. So that's like 130 tackles. So that's under, but then that'd be 13 tackles for loss over. I think that is a stat line that I could see. Absolutely could see that. Secondary accounting for more turnovers, I'll buy that because you said turnovers, not interceptions. Because last year Notre Dame had 16 interceptions, I believe, and the secondary had a lot of them. Actually, let me pull that up real quick because I know they had picked off 16 passes last year. Let me see how many of them were not secondary players. So you had Jack Kaiser had 1. So they had 16 interceptions last year, and Xavier Watts, Benjamin Morrison, Jaden Mickey, Clarence Lewis, Christian Gray, DJ Brown, and Ramon Henderson counted for all but 1 of them. So they had 15 last year. I have no reason to believe that can't continue again this year. And that was just interceptions. But then you throw in, like fumble recoveries and things along those lines. I mean, we think about the, Xavier Watts last year recovers a fumble and takes it back. I mean, so you're going to have some scenarios like that. So yes, I'll take the over on the 15 turnovers from the secondary. Yeah, because they did it last year, and there's no reason to think that they can't do it again. Michael Pate, rank these position groups in order of importance when it comes to winning a championship. D-line, secondary, offensive line. I'm going 1A, 1B, Michael, and you probably didn't want me to do that, but I'm going to do that because, look, you're on both sides of the ball. And when you're on both sides of the ball, one's more important to one side and another's more important to the other side, and you can't win a championship without being good at both of them. And so I'm going O-line and D-line, especially for Notre Dame. I think because if you have a great D-line and a mediocre offensive line or a bad offensive line, it doesn't matter how good your defensive line is. So if I don't see it that way. If you have to be good at both. And if you have a great O-line but a bad D-line, you're not going to be good. Look at Notre Dame in 2015, right? That team, great O-line, D-line wasn't as good, had talent, but it wasn't as good because of the defensive coordinator. You weren't as good. So it's 1A, 1B, O-line, D-line. You need both. You need both lines to be really good. And I don't know many teams that win championships that weren't good on both lines to some degree. And the teams that you could maybe point to, like maybe LSU in 19, maybe, they still had a pretty good D-line. They weren't elite, but they were still pretty good. They could make stops when you needed them to. And so that's why I'm going there. And then secondary's third. I mean, it's good to have a good secondary. You have to have a good secondary to win a championship, but it's not as important as line play, in my opinion. Let's go to Joe Allen. Joe asks, what team, if any, on the 24 schedule would you be worried about being a sleeper team? Joe, that's a good question. So I followed up and asked, I thought John A1 asked this question, but it was Joe. Part of it is, what do you define as a sleeper? A team that's going to be better than people think? A team that's going to go from, like John A1's response was like Michigan was a sleeper team last year. TCU was a sleeper team 2 years ago. I don't think there's that kind of sleeper team on the schedule that all of a sudden like, oh, wow, Louisville became a national title contender or A&M became a national title contender. I don't think there's that on the schedule. I think Georgia Tech is a team that could surprise some people this year. Now, their schedule's pretty hard, so that's going to be – I mean, they've got Georgia and Notre Dame on their non-conference slate. So Georgia's going to have they're going to have some tough sledding, in my opinion, this year. When you look at their schedule, even though they're a talented team, they've played Florida State and Ireland, at Syracuse, at Louisville, at North Carolina, Notre Dame at home, at Virginia Tech, Miami at home, at NC State at home, and then at Georgia. That's a really tough schedule, but I like that team. If they can kind of get hot early, maybe pull off an upset early, they're a team that could maybe be that. Virginia's a team that they're scrappy. I could see them overachieving this year. So being a sleeper team and that they maybe make a bowl game because they're scrappy, maybe they're a team like that. I don't know that there's anyone else in the schedule that, like Stanford. I know a lot of people are talking a lot about Stanford lately. And because Troy Taylor, and he's a very good football coach, is actually recruiting pretty decently right now, but that roster is not very good. I'd be shocked if they were a 7-8 win team this year. I'd be very shocked by that. So I think USC maybe could be a sleeper team because I don't think a lot of fans, and you're seeing some, I've seen a couple rankings that had them in the top 15, but most have them in the 20s or outside the top 25. I think USC, even with their schedule, if Lincoln Riley allows DeAnton Lynn to really run the defense the way he wants to, I think that USC team could be a sleeper team and win 10-plus games, like including the postseason. So I think USC maybe is a sleeper team. I don't think USC is a team that competes for a title. I don't think they're going to be like TCU and Michigan, but I think TCU is going to be a lot better, especially for Notre Dame fans. I think USC is going to be a lot better than what Notre Dame fans think that they're going to be. I could be wrong on that, and I could see that team kind of quitting on Lincoln Riley at some point in time, and then they collapse. That's certainly possible, but I just have a feeling that this USC team is going to be better than a lot of Notre Dame fans think. Ball Peen Shillelagh, if you were a position coach on the Notre Dame offense and defense, be getting paid double. That'd be nice. What group would you want to coach? What would you focus on? How would you rotate players, and who would you start? I mean, what I would coach is positions I know. I mean, so I'd coach either receivers or quarterbacks. I'd probably quarterbacks. How would I rotate players? I wouldn't. I'm not a big fan of rotating quarterbacks. Who would you start? Riley Leonard, certainly. Defensively, if I had to coach a position, probably corners. And we'd be way worse than they are now. Christian Gray, I'd probably move Jaden Mickey to nickel, and Benjamin Morrison boundary is probably what I would do. But, yeah, it's a good question. I don't really think about coaching a lot anymore. I used to think about coaching all the time, but I really don't. I had fun. I was working with a local high school kid the other day. We were trying to work him on a real fast kid. Runs like a 10-6 and 100, but doesn't really know a lot about playing wide receiver, route running, or getting into a stance. And that was fun, but it was kind of like, it was fun for an hour. And then after that, it was like, okay, I enjoy this. I enjoy mentoring. I enjoy teaching, but I don't miss coaching. And I used to have that thought a lot, to be completely honest with you. 99 problems of BKA1. Who projects better to safety? and corner, Jameer Joseph or Cree Thomas. The same guy can be the answer for both questions. Well, for me, it would be the same guy for both questions. To be honest with you, it'd be Cree Thomas. I like Jameer Joseph. I was actually recently finally was able to see some of his junior film. He has actually linked to his Twitter profile, so that was nice. Twitter, I mean, highlights, not full game film. But I like Jameer Joseph. He's a smart kid. He's a quality athlete. I just think Cree's a more dynamic overall player. I think Cree's bigger. I think Cree's a little more physical. I think Cree's more rangy. I think Cree projects more as a corner. I think Jameer could be a solid corner as like an off-ball corner, like playing Cam Hart's position. He could do that. But I think Cree has more of a chance to stick at corner. And then if one of them, if they both move to safety, I still think Cree'd be the better player. He's bigger, he's longer, he's faster. They both have good instincts and play the ball better. Jameer's got really good ball skills. That's one thing I give Jameer. He's got really good ball skills. But I'd probably still go with Cree. I like Jameer Joseph. He's a good football player, but I'd probably still go with Cree. And then we did have a question about that from Brandon Plensner. It says, do you think Penn State is the leader for Jameer Joseph, or is Notre Dame now the leader? I don't know the answer to that, to be honest with you, because I don't know. I don't know if Notre Dame did enough to close the gap if there was one with Jameer. I just think a lot of it's going to be determined by how this weekend goes and whether or not Notre Dame really puts the full court press on him down the road. I know things went well with Jameer. Ryan had an intel report on the board and had a story on that. I don't know enough about Jameer's specific recruitment on the Penn State side to know where they stand. So I do know that Penn State has already pretty much given up on Jadon Blair, and they're now pushing more for Jameer. Does that help them win that battle before Notre Dame's ready to really, really push for Jameer? I don't know the answer to that. But that would be maybe a good question to put on the message board, Brandon, and ask Ryan. Ryan might have a better answer for that than I have. I'm not quite sure of the answer to that. So, but I did want to answer that one. David Lowe says, Brian, on a scale of 1 to 10, how concerned are we about Deuce and Ole Miss? I'm not concerned at all. For two reasons. One is I just don't concern myself. If a kid wants to go to another school and goes to another school, I don't have the same passion about that as I did in the past, and I just don't think it's just healthy for me to do that. I have no control over it. I can't control what Deuce does. I can't control what Ivan Taylor does. I can't control what Marcus Freeman does. I can't control what anybody does. I can control what I do. And so if Deuce decides to go to Ole Miss at some point down the road, I'll wish him the best at Ole Miss. If he decides to go to Bama, I'll wish him the best at Bama. If he decides to go to, UCLA or Hawaii, I'll wish him the best at those places. I'm not concerned about it. It is what it is. Having said that, to answer your specific question about, am I concerned? Do I think there's a possibility of Deuce going to Ole Miss? I'm not saying what other people are saying is wrong. I'm not saying they've got bad intel. I'm not trying to get into that pissing match. What I'm trying to tell you all is just simply what we know. And what we know is what our sources tell us. We've had people at events where Deuce is at. We've talked to coaches. We've talked to people on Deuce's side. We've talked to people on Notre Dame's side. Everyone that we talk to, including some people that we know at Ole Miss. Yes, Ole Miss wants Deuce, but there's no indication that Deuce is receptive to Ole Miss from the standpoint of maybe leaving the Notre Dame class. The only thing that I'm aware of is that Deuce is simply keeping that relationship open, and a lot of kids do this. And a lot of kids that nobody talks about do this. I know for former Notre Dame coach, I'll just say his name, Tony Alford. And Coach Alford still has relationships with recruits he recruited at Notre Dame, kids that he committed at Notre Dame who never went to Notre Dame. And he would maintain, once they kind of got out of college, he would maintain that relationship with the parents and the kid. And I think they kind of consider themselves friends. Because, he went to another school, but I still care about the kid. I still want the kid to be successful in life. And there's a lot of coaches like that. And it's not about trying to flip them back or what. It's just like, I care about the kid. I want him to be successful. And that's what good coaches should be. So, and then players have to kind of do the same thing. Keep that conversation. I got along well with this coach. I'm not going to Ole Miss, but I really like their quarterbacks coach. I get along with Lane Kiffin. But also, you're in Mississippi. You want to make sure that doors are open for your teammates. And then number 3, what if Gino Guidugli leaves at the end of the year? What if Marcus Freeman leaves? If you're Deuce Knight, you have to be prepared for that type of situation. And that's what we're told is it's more of a, I'm not burning any bridges in case I get burned. What if Notre Dame decides to take another quarterback? Well, let's say, I think I've said this before. What if Bryce Underwood calls and says, hey, I want to come to Notre Dame, and Notre Dame's like, cool, we'll take 2 quarterbacks. Well, if you're Deuce, like, F you, I'm going to Ole Miss. He has to, it's smart for him to have that type of thought process. That's different than saying, I'm looking around. And from everything that we've been told, from every source that we have, it's that Deuce is 100% locked in. And not in the same way that other guys said they were, but are not. It's not just what is said, but it's what he does. You know, it's his actions. And there's nothing that Deuce has done that should have people saying, I don't know if Notre Dame's going to keep him. That may change down the road, but right now, I know of nothing that makes that the case. Nothing. And everything that Deuce has done, I mean, he's at Irish Invasion working out. He's on campus middle of this week. He's already got multiple. He's not only was he on campus early this week, and he's going to be back he's going to stay in town. He's got his official visit this weekend. So he's paying on his own dime to come up here, stay at Notre Dame for a couple extra days. Then his official visit starts. And I believe he's also coming back in July for the grill and chill thing that they have in July. Deuce has a lot of visits set up to Notre Dame. I've never been told that he's going to actually visit anywhere else officially or in any kind of capacity other than Hammond Town for a 7-on-7. Go see the campus, just like CJ Carr did when he was in Seattle last year, when he went to Washington. So, I mean, I know some of you obsess over this stuff, and God bless you, but just don't, because you can't control what Deuce is going to do anyway. So be informed. There's nothing wrong with being informed, but I'm just telling you guys, you can believe all the clickbait stuff you want, and maybe some of it's legit, most of it's not, and get worked up about it, or you can just take Deuce at his word and then follow his actions. So I've said, well, what about Peyton Bowen? What about Peyton Bowen? Peyton Bowen said one thing and did another thing. Peyton Bowen said, I'm committed to Notre Dame, and then kept taking visit to Oklahoma. That's different than Deuce's situation. Deuce isn't doing that. So just because one guy acted a certain way doesn't mean we now define every big-time player that way. Just not fair to those kids. Deuce is a different kid than CJ Carr, who's a different kid from Kenny Minchie, who's a different kid from Peyton Bowen. He's a different kid from Keon Keeley. He's a different kid from all types of people. He's his own man. And so there's no evidence Peyton Bowen just flat out lied to people. Players, recruits, coaches, all of it, including Oklahoma. I mean, he lied to them. He told Oklahoma he was coming, and he commits to Oregon. He eventually signs with Oklahoma. So it's so different. And it's not inappropriate. Like it's unwise and unfair to constantly assume Deuce is like some other kid that's that way. I've chosen to take Deuce Knight and his family at their word. Why have I chosen to do that? Because so far they haven't given me any reason not to. Peyton's family did. You know, and Keon Keeley was a different situation than Peyton Bowen as well. Keon Keeley was very honest and upfront with Notre Dame. Keon never lied to Notre Dame. He never said, no, I'm coming, and then snuck other. He told him, hey, I'm going to go take this visit. I'm thinking about this. I'm thinking about that. You know, I'm not sure if I want to do this. I'm thinking about he was honest with Notre Dame. And that's why he ended up decommitting, because he wanted to take visits. And he told him about it. There was no dishonesty with Keon. He was up front. I want to take other visits. I'm not sure about this. And so that's the route he went. He's not like Peyton Bowen. He's not. Peyton just lied to people. It's just, there's no other way around. I'm not trying to be rude to the kid, but I'm just stating facts. You know, so let's stop punishing Deuce because of what other people say, and let's try our best to avoid the noise about, you know, and again, I don't know who's saying, I don't really care who's saying what. I'm not, people think I'm talking about one particular, I'm just talking about in general, this business. It is you get paid. those national writers get paid by how many people click on their stories and how many people watch their shows. We get paid like that to a degree too. But how you handle that and what decisions you choose to make about what you do and don't put out is going to be determined, dictated by that. And so from a business policy, it makes sense to do that. We don't do that. I mean, Ryan and I have had plenty of conversation about that. And fortunately, we're both on the same page. So the conversations are more like, man, we would never do that. It's never like Ryan saying, hey, Brian, I'd really like to put this out. We get a lot of clicks. It's never that. We're on the same page there. So look, guys, you can do with what you want, and things can always change down the road. But I can just tell you today, June 14th, I'm not worried about Deuce decommitting because I just don't care one way or the other. I just don't. I'll find out who signs with Notre Dame, and then when they sign, kids can now transfer after a semester, after a year. Some kids sign, go do or enroll, and then transfer before the fall. It's harder to get invested in it now when it comes to the recruiting aspect of it. I'll evaluate who's there. I'll evaluate who's on the team. I'll evaluate who's in the class now. And if they leave the class, I'll evaluate the class with them gone. Like, I'm not worried about Ivan Taylor decommitting or not. If he chooses to, if Ivan Taylor decides at some point in time that going to another school is best for him, then I'll say, you know what, buddy, best of luck to you. I don't think he's a bad kid. He's not lying to Notre Dame. He didn't sneak a visit to Alabama and not tell him. He didn't sneak a visit to somewhere else and not tell him. He was honest with Notre Dame about it. I have respect for that. And if he decides some other school is best for him, good for him. I'm not concerned with it. And then I'll evaluate the safeties they do sign. I just don't care. It doesn't concern me. Like, I don't like, oh my gosh, I'll evaluate it for what it is. And as of right now, Deuce Knight has done nothing in press conferences, in interviews, by his actions, where he goes. He's done nothing to make Notre Dame fans have the level of angst that they have about him. That could change down the road, but right now there isn't. And so I just would encourage you all to just take a deep breath and just enjoy this ride. That's the best thing I can say to you. I'm not going to obsess over that stuff anymore. All right. Got one from Ball Peen Shillelagh. Says, what non-Notre Dame college football game from the past do you wish you could have been at in person? Texas USC 05 Rose Bowl. That would be it. That was such an awesome game. That's the one game in my head I think about, like, oh, that's the non-Notre Dame game I would love to have been at. That would have been a great game to be at. I mean, it's an iconic venue, the Rose Bowl, right? Historic venue. You've got two legendary coaches in college football, Mac Brown and Pete Carroll, two legendary programs, Texas, USC, two top 10 all-time programs, two Hall of Fame caliber players, actually more than two, Matt Leinart and Reggie Bush on one side, Vince Young on another. Just elite players, good coaching, back and forth. One team's down, they come back. The other team's down, they come back. Great finish. Controversy, right? Like, why isn't Reggie on the field on fourth down? You're like, what the heck? Reggie lateraling the ball backwards and Texas. I mean, it had everything you want in a great game. So USC Texas to me would be the one game I wish I could have been at in person. That would have been a great, great game. Great game to be a part of. All right, we got some more here. We'll get back up top. Michael Collins, will the playoff games name an MVP for each game like a bowl games do, or will it be one MVP at the end? And will there be an all playoff tournament team? Those are all great questions, Michael. I do not have answers for you. I don't know. I would assume that they'll do that because I believe that they still do those things now, although I'm not 100% certain of that, but I believe they do. Let me just look this up real quick and see this. I think they still do that. I still think they do MVPs. Yeah, because like Clemson in 2018, MVPs were Trevor Lawrence and Austin Bryant. So I would imagine for like the individual bowl games, let's do that. As far as, will they have an MVP at the end? Will they have an all playoff tournament team? Look, that would bring a lot of like attention. So my guess would be yes, but that's just a guess. I'll tell you what, it's not a bad idea. That's something we'll do, but I don't know if it's going to be like official. I really don't. So I wish I had a better answer for that, but I just don't. John A1. Actually, we got that one already. Let's get down here to some more here. Okay, John A1. Kenny Minchie has developed or shown dual threat ability. Has that hindered his progression and processing, seeing the field, and getting the ball to the right spot? I don't believe so, John. Look, we've been to practices. We don't see Kenny running around a lot. I think Kenny is a good athlete that in that particular game, those opportunities were there. I don't believe that this is something that's hindering his ability to process. I think Kenny reads things relatively well for a redshirt freshman. So I think he's good there. I don't think that's an issue. I think Kenny's issue are more just, continue to put in the work to get better, maybe play with a little bit more fire, a little bit more drive, and just keep developing. I mean, Kenny's fine for me in a lot of different ways. The only reason that we're even having thoughts about that is just because of how loaded the room is. If CJ Carr doesn't come to Notre Dame and, the quarterback they signed at 24, some okay kid, we're probably talking as much about Kenny Minchie as we are CJ Carr. It's a unique situation, but I don't think that's an issue. I think it can be an issue for that type of quarterback, but I think Kenny scrambled a couple times in the game. I don't think he's all of a sudden turned into like a dual threat quarterback. I just think it's kind of how it played out in that particular game. We didn't really see him doing a lot of that, and it was out of need. And he can do it out of need. I just don't think it's something that necessarily is a big part of his game all of a sudden, in my opinion. Josh Miller, good question here. Does depth of the defense determine the pace the offense can play? It does. It does. If you're smart, it does. Because if you don't have good depth on defense, especially now if you're trying to compete for a championship, you're going fast and you don't have good depth on defense. Your defense is going to not only wear down in the course of the season, they're going to wear down each game. Like once you get past game like 2 or 3, they're going to wear down every game because they're going to have to be on the field so much. And if you're going fast, not only are they on the field for a lot of plays, but there's not a lot of time in between series for them to kind of get some rest. And so if you're going fast, it can have an impact on that. There's no question. So a smart coach, absolutely, Josh, will the pace of play will determine that. Now, and that's where a good head coach comes into play. So let's say Notre Dame's pushing the tempo this year, and they're a little thin on the D-line. It's got some injuries or whatever the case may be. A little thin in the secondary line, but something, just a little thin that game. And Marcus Freeman's got to go to Mike Denbrock and say, hey, Coach, we got to slow it down a little bit on this next drive. We're gassed over here. He's got to see that. Coach Freeman's got to see that and say, hey, we're a little gassed over here. Let's move it a little bit slower pace. Here a little bit. Let's maybe consider taking a timeout at some point in time if you need to. But this series, let's try to put a drive together here. Don't come out and go bomb, 3-and-out punt. Or, now sometimes it doesn't work. Okay, we're going to go ball control and we're going to slow it down on the first play. We run counter and it goes for 70. Oh, them's the breaks. You know what I mean? But that's what a good head coach will do is he'll notice that, hey, we got to slow it down a little bit here for a series. Let these kids catch their breath. And if you're really smart about it, maybe you time it around certain timeouts, TV timeouts, or whatever the case may be, to allow them to catch their breath a little bit more. But, yeah, that's something that a head coach will have to do from time to time. It's a little harder in football than it is basketball. It's called random timeout. But a lot of coaches try to use their timeouts for like late half maneuvering and things like that. I actually don't think enough football coaches use timeouts for things like this. I think they should do it more often, to be completely honest with you, where your offense is on the field, you're giving your team a chance to get a breather. Because when you call a timeout on defense, they're standing around you, they're still up, they're getting water, but they're not running, but they're still standing. When you do it on offense, your defense is over there sitting, getting treatment, getting ice put on them if it's a hot day, whatever the case may be, refueling, getting oxygen, all that kind of stuff. I think it's better for you to delay it there than to use a timeout on defense because you're getting gassed. That's just my personal opinion on that one. Carlos Garza. I know they've been moving Jaden Osbury around, but do you think they find a way to put Kingston, Viliama-Asa, Drake, and Jaden Osbury on the field at the same time? I think it's possible, Carlos. I mean, we've seen it in practice. I mean, we saw it in the Jersey scrimmage. We saw a snap where it was Drake, Kingston, and Jaden Osbury on the field at the same time. So it wouldn't shock me. I don't think they're necessarily trying to force that right now. It's more about there could just be a time where that's your three best linebackers, or two of those guys are your best linebackers, and then the other guy's rotating, and sometimes that guy's going to rotate there. Or it may be a thing where Drake's your starter, Mike. Let's say Kingston's your backup, Will. Jaden's either your starter or backup, Rover. There may be a series where you want your starting Mike on the field with the number twos of those other positions, and it's there. It's not necessarily designed to get them on the field at the same time, specifically those three, but more so about, hey, you want your one, like Notre Dame in 18, that D-line in 18, they would start the game with Tillery and Bonner on the field together. Bonner was the nose, Tiller's the three. And then after about the second or third series, for most of the game, you'd have Tillery on the field with, I think it was like Kurt Heinisch, and then you'd have Bonner on the field with Myron Tagovailoa because they didn't want both backups on the field at the same time a lot. Now, there'd be times when you'd have the two backups, but a lot of the times, the two starters together. But when there was a backup, a lot of times it'd be, it wouldn't be both of them in. And that's something that we were a little critical of the Notre Dame defense in 2022. One of the frustrations I had is they would make like wholesale subs. So you'd be playing a decent team, and all of a sudden you're like, the whole D-line is backups, and you have two backup linebackers. Like, hold on a second. You need to be a little bit more strategic about some of these substitutions. And this past season, we saw a lot better job of that. There'd be times when you'd see the D-line being, three of the four guys being backups, but you could get away with it because you were better there. But then you usually have your starting linebackers in the game at that point in time. So you got to be a little bit strategic about those kind of things. So I could see something along those lines happening for sure. All right. Quinn Kelly, hardest thing about starting your company? That's a great question. The hardest thing about starting my company was just the unknown, the uncertainty, the risk. We didn't have kids, so we didn't have kids to worry about. So I was fortunate in that regard from a business standpoint. I don't believe I'm fortunate to not have kids. I would love to have kids, but fortunate from the standpoint of starting a business standpoint that we didn't have kids. And then it came down to my wife and I making the decision, like, are we going to go this road, or am I going to try to, do something else, work for somebody else or whatever. And we decided it was time to start my own business, which I'd wanted to do for a while. And so there was risk. And then, there's just the having some convictions of how you're going to do it, but then also having and never losing those convictions, but then also being willing to adapt certain things. Like, hey, these are some non-negotiables, right? I was having a conversation with somebody the other day, and we were talking about partner or something. And I was like, look, and he had some non-negotiables and I had some non-negotiables. Well, if those non-negotiables don't match up, then we can't, no respect for what you do, but it's just not going to work out. Right. And so what are those non-negotiables that you're not going to be flexible on? But what are things that you may be willing to be flexible on? If you'd have told me that we were going to do live YouTube shows every day when I first started Irish Breakdown, man, I would have told you, like, there's no way. There's no way. I have no interest in doing that. There's no way I'm going to do that. But I was open enough to it to where we'd say, you know what, let's try these videos. And then it became, well, let's try and go live. And then it was like, well, let's do more live shows. And now this is what we do. So those are things you look at is are you willing to take the risk, the financial risk? And there were some very tough times financially for my wife and I during those first couple of years. I mean, if you think about it, I basically launched Irish Breakdown the end of September of 2019. 6 months later, we have the COVID stuff and they cancel sports. And so it's like, well, great. I have this new startup company and there's no sports to cover. Wonderful. So there were some tough times, but, we prayed a lot about it and we made, decisions that ended up being good for us and have worked out well for us. And now we are where we are. So it's been good. It's been good, but there's risk involved. You've got to be willing to make sacrifices. You've got to be willing to take chances if you want to be successful. And some people just aren't willing to do that. And that's okay, right? Not everybody's meant to be a leader. Not everybody's meant to be an owner. Some people are just, hey, man, I just want to go work. So I know coaches in football, I just want to be an assistant coach. I don't want to be a coordinator. I don't want to be a head coach. I just want to be an assistant coach. There's nothing wrong with that. If you find something you're good at and something you're passionate about, then do it. For me, the reason I wanted to be my own business is because, as you guys know, I mean, I'm a little opinionated, and I think I know some stuff, and I felt there was a right way to do certain things, and I wanted to try it and see if it would work. And so far for us, it has. It's worked great so far. But that's this is the risk involved, and being able to say, hey, look, this may not work. We may fall flat on our face and be in major trouble financially, but this is what we're going to do. And to do it without taking out, I didn't take out any loans. I didn't take a second mortgage out of my house. I said, look, I'm not going to run up credit card debt. We're going to do this without doing all that stuff. And that's kind of where we were. And we've caught some breaks along the way. Somebody asked, did Marcus Freeman taking over impact your business? Not nearly as much as Brian Kelly leaving impacted our business. Because we had just we were just getting into this space. We were kind of growing. We had like real good, steady growth. We launched the message board in, I think, July of 2019 or 2021. And, we were growing. I mean, every month we got bigger and better. We already had a schedule. And then Brian Kelly leaves. And all of a sudden, all these people found our channel. And then from that, they then found the message board. And it just took off that November, December. Those things happen. But, you had to put yourself in position to take advantage of it. If we hadn't taken the chances and the risks of starting the business and then doing the podcast and then doing all these things, then we wouldn't have been there to be found. And so if it's something that you believe in, something you love, figure out the things that you are passionate about, make sure that there's some non-negotiables that you believe in, that you're not willing to sacrifice. Be open-minded enough on other things to say, hey, we're going to go about it this way, and then take your chance. And not everybody can start a business the way that I did without taking out any loans. Sometimes you may have to do that. I didn't need to and didn't want to, and wanted to do a little bit differently. And for me, it's worked. For other people, you couldn't. You can't. I mean, there's some things you can't do. I want to start my own contracting business. Okay, it's impossible unless you already have the capital already to spend in it. It's impossible to start that without an investor or a loan or something like that. I understand that. For us, it's a little different because all we needed was like internet and a computer. You know what I mean? And so it worked for us. A friend of mine just texted me, and he made actually a great point. He said, telling the great Lou Samudji that you were leaving Blue and Gold. That was very hard. So Lou's in my driveway. He's got tears coming down his face. I got tears coming down my face. That was very hard to do. Very hard to do. And because I absolutely adored Lou as a person and a mentor and a friend. And so that was not easy, but he understood. It was not, he knew it was not good. I was not in a good place where I was. I didn't enjoy it there. He knew the issues I was dealing with my boss, with my coworkers, and he supported the decision, even though he didn't, want me to leave. But yeah, that's why. So be willing to take the chance and take the risk, but make sure your family's on board. Because if my wife did not have my back when I went this direction, it would not have worked. Or at least it might have worked, but then I'd be a single guy and half my stuff would be with her. So I'm one of those people that believes behind every successful man is a great woman, and that is 100% true in my family. It's 100% true with my father. It's 100% true with me. Where I don't know that I could, not even just because she built me the website, but just the support, the faith, the times I'm like, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if this is going to work. To have her there say, no, you got this. You believed in it. Stick with it. You got this. It's been such a blessing for me to have her by my side and to be my partner in all this. And to also then to trust me that, hey, I believe in you. So take that chance and we'll make it work. So that's been a huge thing for me. So thank you for asking that, Quinn. And then for the previous question about, where I see IB and all that kind of stuff. PA Irish guy. I feel the KK Smith is forgotten about in the receivers room. What do you think would be a good stat line for him this season? I always laugh about this because I'm like, who are you talking about? Like forgotten by who? We talk about KK all the time. So I don't know who you're talking about there, but look, I think KK's a player that has a chance to help Notre Dame out this year. If KK can have 15 grabs or so, that'd be a good year for him. 15 being the floor, maybe, say 12 to 15, be a part of that rotation. Have some games he won't catch any balls, but then some games he'll catch 2 or 3. Maybe have that one breakout game. If he can be around 15 plus grabs this year, I think that'd be a good year for KK. Average around 13 to 15 yards per catch. Be a good number, touchdown or 2. Considering he missed all of last year with an injury, I think that's a good bounce back, get himself right year. And then now, if KK has that kind of year, when you go into next offseason, you're like, do we need to go get another Chris Mitchell? Or are we comfortable with where we are with KK and Cam Williams and Micah Gilbert, and then maybe one of Jaden or Bo Collins or Jaden or Dion maybe coming back too, and then whoever incoming freshman you have, hey, we feel good about where we are. We need to go in the portal now. So I think KK stepping up, it could be not only good for him, but good for Notre Dame in the future, because then they don't have to worry about maybe going to the portal. Between him and Cam, you'll feel pretty darn good about where you are at Z next year. But they need to show that and show some level of production this year to get to that point in time. Another one from PA Irish guy. What player on defense would need to break out to have a truly elite championship level defense? Well, I don't know if there's one guy that needs to break out or they won't. So I don't if this guy doesn't break out, they can't have an elite championship level defense. I think there's 2 guys that have to play well for them to be that way. For them to really, I'm trying to think how to say it. There's a couple guys that I think are very important to making sure that they can stay where they are, if not maybe improve. And that's Drake Bowen and Christian Gray, to me. I believe those 2 guys have to play well for this team to maintain what they have been, right? And it's because I think Notre Dame in a lot of ways was kind of already an elite championship level defense last year. I mean, you look at the rankings, you look at the different efficiency rankings. So let me pull up the FEI real quick and the Fremo Efficiency Index, which is one that I like to use. And you look at the Notre Dame defense for last year. So you go to 2023 and look at the defense, and Notre Dame's defense last year was the number 6 defense in the country in the Fremo Efficiency Index. And 4 of the 5 teams ahead of them were from the Big Ten, because let's be honest, the Big Ten had good defenses, but also had really bad offenses. And then you look at Notre Dame and kind of where they ranked nationally last year in a lot of the top defensive categories. I mean, they were the number 7 scoring team in the country in scoring defense last season. They were, let me go to here, they were 6th amongst Power 5 teams, right? Because Ohio U was ahead of them. 4 of the 5 were Big Ten teams, again, because the Big Ten had bad defenses. And so, I mean, they were a team that I thought were one of the better defenses in college football last year. I mean, I thought they were really, really good last season on defense. So I think they were kind of already there. They were kind of already sort of that really championship caliber unit, maybe some slight improvements in some other areas. Now, were they a defense that were capable of being what Georgia was in 2021? No, they weren't that. They weren't that. They were more what I think kind of like what Michigan's defense was, as opposed to what Georgia's defense was in 2021, or what Clemson's defense was in 2018, or what Bama's defense was in like 2012. They weren't quite that. Now, to get to that level, obviously you definitely need Drake and Christian to break out. But I'll say it this way. So I went that long tangent to get to here. There is one player whose breakout could have the biggest impact on this defense. If this guy has a big breakout, he could have a bigger impact than anybody else on raising the level of play. And I've said it before, it's Boubacar Traore. I truly believe if Boubacar has the breakout we all, fingers crossed, hope he has, and I think it's probably a year away from having, I think he's the kind of guy that could completely change the way this team plays. If you can put a guy in the boundary or on the weak side, Viper, who can just go out there and just be an elite pass rusher, then that makes it so much harder to defend to handle Notre Dame's defense. It makes it so much harder to pass pro You got to start sliding your protection to him. That's going to be right now Golden's wheelhouse. You have to chip on him, which means you have one less guy in pass pro against this elite secondary. You give me a guy in the boundary or the weak side that can just get after the quarterback at just holy moly. That would make this defense the best defense in college football, in my opinion. I think it could. It could. And it could be good enough to where you're winning games in the playoff because of that defense, as opposed to they're really good and now your offense needs to – you could actually go out there and win because of them. I could see that. That's how Michigan was. I mean, Michigan won the title because of their defense. I mean, just flat out. Yeah, their offense had to make a couple plays in the fourth quarter to beat Bama, but you shut Alabama down in that game. I mean, they did a job against that Washington offense that nobody else has done. I mean, they made life hard for them, man, really hard for them. You held Washington to 301 yards of offense last year. You held Alabama to 288. That's really good. That is really good. I mean, you look at Washington last year, and you look at their offense. They averaged total offense. They averaged 462 yards per game, and if you take out that game, it was even higher. So I think there's only like one other game all year that they had lower yards, and that was against Arizona State, which is just, I don't know if you guys watch that game. It's just a terrible game. They did a great job against that Washington offense in that game. And they averaged 5.0 yards per pass attempt. It was their lowest total of the season. They had for only time all season, they had a QB rating of under 100. The next lowest was like 109. They were at 93.57. So Michigan won a championship because their defense played at an elite level in the postseason. There's no doubt. I think Notre Dame could maybe do that for a couple games. I don't know if Michigan could have done that for 3 or 4. I think it kind of worked out well for them. But to really get to that next level, that truly elite, 2018 Clemson, 2021 Georgia, I think that Boubacar is a guy. And if it's not Boubacar, maybe it's Burnham. Maybe it's Bryce Young. But I say Boubacar because I think that Viper position is the one where it's even more important than big end. I think that's why I go with him. Now, maybe they move Burnham back over and he has the breakout. It's more the Viper position, and right now Boubacar is the best option. Okay, let's get to some more here. Questions. We have a lot of good ones today. Link says Carr is clearly number 2. Under Kelly, he would have started Angeli over Carr. Will Freeman actually play Carr over Angeli and Minchie? At some point, I think so. Yeah, I don't know if that it'll be like game 1. I don't know if Riley Leonard goes down in the opener, all of a sudden you're going to see CJ Carr in there. I don't know that that's the case right now. That could change. But I do believe from conversations I've had that right now CJ Carr is viewed as the next in line. When you need a starter. That doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be number 2 right now, but I do believe he's the future at quarterback. I do believe that. Charles Lynch, how do you see the Notre Dame O-line stacking up against the A&M D-line? It's a little early. I think they'll stack up fine. I think Texas A&M is a very good defense, has a potential to have a very good defensive line, mainly because they got Nick Scourton. They have some decent players up the middle, some good players up the middle. The other kid, the Shamar Stewart kid, I think there's a lot of hype about him, and he's really good. And I'm like, he hasn't done anything in college. The reason that the hype is because he was like a top 5 overall player coming high school. Now, maybe he has a breakout. Maybe he does. But he hasn't done anything in college so far. But it's a good D-line. It's a talented D-line. It's just not this elite D-line that I think some people are making it out to be, in my opinion. So I think both of them have some talented players and some veteran players. I think there's one potential matchup that A&M could create major havoc, and that's Scourton against the right tackles. If I'm A&M, I'm putting him up against the right tackles as often as I can and just saying, we're going to blow you up and make Notre Dame be left-handed the whole game. I could see something like that could create some major problems, but that's more about him in that matchup. And then Notre Dame would have to have some answers. But if he doesn't have a dominant game, then I think Notre Dame could roll A&M. But he's a really good football player. And he's a bit unique player. He's an edge player. He's 280 plus. He's a very talented player. I'm more concerned about him more so than the A&M D-line as a whole. I think he could be that game wrecker. and you have to make sure you don't let him be that game wrecker. And if you keep him from being a game wrecker, then I like Notre Dame in that matchup. I really do. Peter Freibert, who is the head coach that will have their name thrown around for other head coaching gigs at the end of the 2024 season? You know, it's funny, Peter. I was actually talking about this last night with someone named Peter. Swear. A friend of mine started talking to me about UTSA, Texas San Antonio, and how he's their sleeper team. They're his sleeper team in the AAC. I personally like Memphis in the AAC this year as of now. I mean, it's still got a lot of studying to do, but as of now, I really like Seth Hannigan. I think Memphis has a lot coming back. They got some good transfer guys, but their schedule is a little challenging, but I love what Jeff Traylor's done at UTSA. I do. And I said to him in the conversation, I said, I'm really shocked that no one scooped him up yet. And we saw, we've seen some of those guys go. Now, Willie Fritz is at Houston now. So we've seen some of those smaller G5 guys now get jobs. I think Traylor could be in line to be that next line, especially if my buddy's right about UTSA, because I believe, let me just look this up real quick. I believe that Frank Harris is gone. I could be wrong on that, but I believe Frank Harris is gone from there. So let me just look this up real quick, because that is AAC. So yes, he is gone. Owen McCown now is projected quarterback. So now you've got a new quarterback. You've lost all the receivers that have had that production. Trey Moore, actually, was Trey Moore at UTEP? Yeah, Trey Moore was at UTEP. But you had a lot of guys leave to go to other places, the NFL, whatever. You're kind of rebuilding a little bit now, or at least attempting to reload. If he can keep winning without that core that he had that gave them so much success the last 3 years, I believe he becomes a hot name. So that's a guy that really pops off. Jamie Chadwell at Liberty is another one that pops off. If he has another good year at Liberty, because he did well at Coastal Carolina. So Ryan just texted me, Trey Moore was at UTSA. So that's another one. He transferred to Texas. So that's another really good player. Thanks, Ryan. And so, you're in a situation now where there's two guys to me that, in my view, could be that next line guy. With Jamie Chadwell and Jeff Traylor are two guys that I could see that. And so there's some SEC, ACC coaches on the hot seat a little bit this year. And those guys are certainly in those wheelhouses. So with Chadwell being an East Coast guy at Coastal, and then now at Liberty, and then Jeff Traylor being a Texas guy. So I could see those guys being the big names that are, group of five guys that are going to get their name thrown around. So of the coaches, now there's going to be some coordinators and stuff, but as far as the current head coaches, because you said who is a head coach that will have his name, those are the two that pop off to me when I think about that question. So it's a good question, Peter. Domer, since birth, do you see the team purposely not wanting to qualify for conference championships down the road for the sake of playoff seeding? Hate to ask the question, but would be a terrible direction. Cheers. Well, I mean, they cannot want it, but the only way that would be a problem is if they throw a game, or, they do kind of what we see in basketball where, hey, we're not going to play our starters because we don't want to play in the conference championship game. The problem is if you do that, you're going to get a lower seed anyway. I mean, if you lose a game because you don't want to play in the championship game, then your seeding is going to get impacted anyway. So I don't see that being the case, because if you're in a Power 5 team or Power 4 team, you got a pretty good chance of getting a bye if you win your conference championship. Here's the thing, if you are, remember the one year it was, I'm trying to remember, it was like Big East. The Big East champ was like UConn was like 8-4, and they played in the Orange Bowl. There was a year a couple years ago where Pitt played in the conference championship game at 7-5. I think it was 18. They played Clemson. They were like 7-5, then lost the conference championship game, and then lost a bowl game and finished 7-7. Like, if you're 7-5 in that scenario and you win your conference championship, you're a top 4. You're a top 4 to 5 seed. You're a top 4 seed potentially, or you got an automatic qualification. So if you're a good team that has a chance to be in the playoff and you win your conference championship, you have 2 losses. You want to be in the conference championship game, because now you got a chance. Because, like, let's say Georgia, perfect example, Georgia. Let's say Clemson loses to Georgia loses to Clemson in the opener, and then they lose at Bama. So they go down the road. They're 10-2. They're ranked 5th or 6th, and if you don't play in the SEC title game, then you're at best a 5 seed. Maybe you're a 6 or 7 seed, depending on how things shake out, because they'd have the same problem Notre Dame does. Now, all of a sudden, you win your first round game. You now got to go on the road and play 2 or 3 maybe, as opposed to, hey, we win our conference championship. Even though we're 10-2, we want to be in that conference championship game, win that, be 11-2, and then jump in and get that 3 or 4 seed. Now we're in a better situation because we're not playing the 2 seed or the 3 seed. We're now that team. So I don't think you're going to see that. I don't think that's going to be an issue. I really don't, because you want to win it. If you have a chance to get in the conference title game, then you have a chance to lock in a top 4 seed. Like that's like if you're one of the power fours, you got a pretty good chance of doing that. I think you're going to want to take advantage of that. So I don't think that's the case. Here's a unique question: Revenge of the Nerds or Animal House? I would go with Animal House, although I was not a fan of either. I thought Revenge of the Nerds was stupid, and I thought Animal House was funny, but it's not the iconic movie for me that it maybe is for some other people. But it was funny. It was entertaining. Some good actors in it. But I would definitely take Animal House over Revenge of the Nerds. I was not a big fan of Revenge of the Nerds. It's kind of corny, in my opinion. I know some of you are going to hate me for saying that. I realize that. But yeah, I was not Andrew Gilmore, my man, we agree on something. Animal House, let's go. John Belushi being in the unifier today. I love it. So yeah, that's going to be an Animal House for me. So yeah, my guy, Andrew Gilmore, and I, we agree on that one. AST, my dad's probably going to be so mad at me for not saying I didn't love Animal House. He's probably going to be so disappointed. Where did I go wrong as a father? My son doesn't like Animal House. Now, if I said I didn't like Harlem Nights or Rodney Dangerfield movie, he'd probably disown me. So I don't think he would have quite the same reaction to Animal House, but I do believe he liked Animal House. AST 12321. If you had to choose between winning 1 national title this year with no more in the next 20 years or 2 to 3 sometime in the next 20 years, what would you choose? I would choose the 2 to 3 over the next 20 as opposed to 1 now and then no more. Because, yeah, I'd rather win more. Yeah, I'd rather win more. Throwing Hands Irish says part 1, 2 years. Let's see. Hold on a second. Part 1. Okay. 2 years from and 2 national championships. Marcus Freeman gets hired as the Chicago Bears head coach. Do you promote Al Golden or Mike Denbrock or hire Jeff Brom? Part 2 is, for the purpose of the question, Louisville wins 9-10 games the next 2 years and makes another ACC title game. If Notre Dame wins a title or wins 2 championships, I'm promoting from within. I'm hiring either Golden or Denbrock or, Mickens, somebody like that. I would promote somebody like that as opposed to going outside. Look, I love Jeff Brom as a coach, but Jeff Brom's not a dynamic recruiter. So the advantage he would have over Al Golden would not be very good. So if Mike Denbrock or Al Golden wanted to be that guy, I would strongly consider it. I would probably strongly consider maybe Dylan McCullough, maybe Mike Mickens as somebody on staff, but most likely the coordinators would be my first 2 options. So that's the direction I would go because I think they're both capable of being head coaches. And Al Golden's been a head coach at a big-time program. He wasn't incredibly successful, but I honestly think, and I've said this before, I think that had more to do with the fit wasn't good than anything else. My concern with Al Golden being the head coach, here'd be my only concern with Coach Golden as the head coach is he's not a real dynamic recruiter. And I would worry about that. I would worry about losing that recruiting prowess, whereas Mike Denbrock would be a better recruiting head coach than Al Golden. That'd be my only concern. But if you'd have 2 titles, recruiting kind of takes care of itself. You put a staff together of dynamic recruiters, and you do whatever you need to do to keep Chad Bowden. That's the big thing there. So that would be one. Yeah. Throwing Hands Irish has had the 2-parter, so let's go down to TJ Kreider. Actually, I think I missed a question from my guy DMND13. I'll get to you next. I did pass you up accidentally. I'll get to yours next. TJ Kreider, what's the home game ritual look like in the Driscoll household from breakfast to game time? Well, obviously, if it's a home game, right, so we're working. So depending on what time the game is, so if we do a normal 3:30 game, Normally, Angela and I will get up and we'll get showered and get dressed, and we'll go to breakfast. There's a place nearby, Copper Creek, that we will go to and have breakfast, or I'll make breakfast at home, and we'll have breakfast and then get our stuff packed. She packs her gear, I pack my gear, and we get in the car and we drive to the game and we cover the game. If we're doing a tailgate, obviously we just get up in the morning and we just get ready and go to the tailgate. But on a normal game day, we go there. Notre Dame, when they have chili, I usually have a bowl of chili. They have pretty good chili in the press box, which I'm a big fan of. And then I work. I don't really have a ritual outside of that. The only one thing that Vince and I do is when the game starts, we're usually outside at first, just because I feel like being outside allows me to get a sense of the environment, allows me to get a sense a little bit more of some of the energy, which helps me evaluate kind of how things are than it's sitting in a soundproof booth does. So there are advantages to it, and that's why we do it. And so that's kind of the ritual. For road games, it's just kind of similar thing. I'm in my hotel until I go have breakfast. I'm in my hotel until I leave for the game because it's a work day for us. So we don't have a chance. Now, when it's a night game, we'll do breakfast and then we'll kind of have lunch together at some point in time. And then I'm sitting there watching the noon games and having fun watching the noon games and maybe watch the kickoffs of the 3:30 games before we head to the stadium. But that's only for the night games. Now, when it's a bye week, Angela knows I'm going to be pretty useless on Saturday because I'm going to have the TV in front of me. I'm going to have my laptop here. Because I'm actually going to be down here when it's normally when it's either down here or up in the living room. And a lot of times last year I'd be down here because I've got my monitor over here, my secondary monitor. I'd hook my laptop up over here and I'd have an iPad. I have two iPads. So I'd have like my work iPad and my personal iPad. I have them set up and I've got games everywhere. Or depending on how many games, I'd go upstairs and with my TV and I'd have my laptop on one. I'd have that connected to my external monitor, have that over here. And then I have my iPad in the middle and I have 4 games. And she knows, leave me alone. And at some point in time, I'm going to have nachos. That's about the only rituals I have. I'm not a big ritual guy. It's never really been my thing. I never had that thing I had to do before every game. I had to wear my lucky socks. That's never been my thing. But now, especially since it's a work day, it's harder to have that kind of thing. But I do like to do something with her in the morning before we get going is what I do. So my guy, DM ND13, if Micah Gilbert has 30-plus receptions in the regular season, is that good news or troubling news for the wide receiver position this year, and more specifically the boundary position? I get where you're coming from on that. I'll say this, Dan. I think that's good news. And in past years, that might be concerning because what it would mean is the veterans didn't play well and you had to go to some young guy that's an okay player and he became your guy. Kind of like Rico Flores last year. It wasn't good that Rico had the production he had. It wasn't good. It was not good because other guys got hurt and there it showed some problems with the coaching staff and it was not good for Notre Dame. If Micah Gilbert has 30-plus receptions, it's because he's just better than those other guys. And he showed enough this spring that he's a good football player like that. So it would be more about maybe Micah Gilbert's a little better than we thought. And Micah Gilbert grew up quickly and he's a guy that's ready to go out and be an impact guy. The receiver depth is such that the only way he has that kind of production is if crazy injuries happen all year, just crazy injuries happen, or B, he's really good and he takes his game to the next level. So for me, I look at it and say, I could certainly see a scenario where it's just because he's that good. So I'd lean towards that now. In past years, I might that means the other guys didn't step up. There's just so many options now that I have a hard time seeing 4 guys just don't do anything. It would mean Micah's really good. So very, very good question. Very good question, Dan. Let's go here to Aiden Benami. Do you think the SEC will get 5 teams in the playoff and the Big Ten will get 4 teams in? I don't. Because basically if that happens, so you'd have the 2 conference winners from that league and then 7 at-larges from that league. So then you would basically have the Big 12 winner, the ACC winner, and then the best group of 5. That would be it. That would be I don't see a scenario where no second team from the ACC or Notre Dame gets in. I don't see that scenario happening. And if Notre Dame gets in, which I expect them to, then it's impossible for the Big Ten and the ACC to combine for more than 8 teams because you'd have the 8 teams You'd have Notre Dame, that's 9. And then you'd have the Big 12, ACC, and the group of 5. So, I don't think that. If that was a buy, sell, or hold, I would sell that. My friend would sell that. But good question. We have, let's see here. Let me get down to some more. I want to get to some we haven't gotten to yet. Well, here's a good one from John A1. John says, does Joe Rudolph lean towards experience again in year 2? Did he actually make a mistake in year 1? Coogan over Shrouth. If he does choose experience seniority, what does that mean for the line? That's a great question. I'll say this. I think to answer the second part of your question, do I think he made a mistake last year with Shrouth and Coogan? I don't, from the standpoint of simply starting Shrouth or Coogan. I said at the time, look, if Shrouth took a step back in fall camp, I get it. You want to start Coogan. He knows what he's doing. Fine. The mistake for me was just not playing Shrouth at all. That was the mistake for me. It was like, look, if the young guy's not quite ready, that's fair. But you've got to figure something out to get that guy going. What I said early in the season was you find a rotation, which we have seen work at Notre Dame before. You find a rotation and you figure out ways to get Billy Shrouth on the field in some real situations. Now, it somewhat benefited Notre Dame. They kind of blew out a lot of their early opponents. And but even then, he only played 6 snaps against Navy, played 12 against Tennessee State, 3 against NC State, 6 against Central Michigan. That's all he played. And he didn't play at all against Ohio State, didn't play at all against Duke. And then they did that silly rotation thing against Louisville, which I was told they didn't tell the players that till the day of the game. And he played 18, none against USC, 18 against Pitt, 6 against Clemson, and then he played a bunch in the last 3 games. It was a mistake not to have him play more early. Even if you want to start Coogan, it was a mistake to not have him play earlier. I do believe that. So what, is he going to lean towards experience in year 2? Coaches always lean towards experience, unless experience is just clearly not better. And what would it mean if he chooses that this year? It would mean that, I don't think that's going to be the issue this year. I don't. Perhaps he would lean towards Tosh Baker over Emil or Gerby early. But I think Gerby's older now than Billy was last year. Gerby's a junior now. Billy and Ashton were sophomores last year. It's just a little bit of a different situation. It's not so much complete lack of, experience because, yes, they haven't played a lot of snaps, but, he's still a junior. But it would mean that, okay, does he pick Coogan over Rocco because he has 3 more games maybe? But look, Jagasaw is going to be the left tackle. Craig's going to be the center. Shrouth's going to be the right guard. I just think those things are kind of done, barring those guys getting hurt or just having major setbacks. So the seniority would be it's just not, we're already seeing him not be geared towards that. We've already seen him take a senior who started 10 games and move him away from right guard because Billy was the guy. We've already seen that. So I think we've already seen him kind of move away from that and go with be more willing to go with the talent at a position, at least to some degree. Ken Carson says, what are some uniform combos you'd like to see in the future? New designs, color schemes, all black helmets, etc. So I'll say this, Ken, I am not an all black jersey fan unless that is somewhat in your color scheme anyway. There are some teams I'm totally fine doing the all black thing, teams that already kind of like if Oklahoma State they have black in kind of somewhat featured in their uniform and their logo anyway. So I have no problem with that. There's other teams that like Rutgers, I think could get away with going all black because again, there's an element of black in their logo with the outline and things like that, where it's like, okay, that would make sense. There's other teams that do it. And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. Like you don't even have black as part of your uniform. And in my opinion, I'm a big believer that if you're going to go away from, your normal, your sort of your normal uniform combination, then you still stick to your color scheme, right? So like Notre Dame has gone away from their traditional uniforms plenty of times, but it's still for the most part something related to their color scheme. There's been some times they like go a different type of green, like the Army game in 2016 was a little different type of green. And and they, did the pinstripe thing in 2018 at Yankee, but it was still blue, green, or white. They're not going like pink. They're not going, black, all black. So I stay true to who you are. Like I think when Ohio State goes all black, I just think that's tired. I just, whatever. It looks bad. So I wouldn't do it. Now, I have come around on the notion of being more willing to mix up your uniform combinations. I do not want to see Notre Dame like Oregon, where every week it's a new combination, but I wouldn't mind seeing the Shamrock uniform, a big game uniform, and then a road game uniform. I actually kind of liked that last year. And so I would say the one that I want to see, and I've talked about this before, the one I would really love to see is gold helmets, green jerseys with the white numbers and the gold outline, and white pants. And we've seen players take pictures in that. I've talked about this before. That would be something I think would be sweet for home game. I think it'd be very sweet for a home game. I would love to see that. And I've also talked about, if I could alter uniforms, I would lean more into the green with gloves and shoes, even when you're at home and you're blue and gold. I would love to see gold, white, green and white. I would love to see, I did kind of like the road game, the all white, but I would have rather seen green as the jersey number as opposed to the blue. I wouldn't mind seeing a blue pant. So, if you're going to go, or maybe even a green pant, although I think that might be a little bit kind of pop a little too much, but like maybe a golden, gold helmet, white jersey, maybe a blue pant for a road game, maybe green. I just have to see what type of green it would be, but like maybe green pants with a green number, gold outline, maybe would be something I'd like to see a design for. Like if I'm the head coach, I'm like, okay, give me this design. Let me see it, see if I like it or not. That would be one. I've thought about, like, if Notre Dame could find a way to make gold work more in a jersey, maybe having like an alternate where you have a little bit more gold in your jersey. I wouldn't want to go all gold because I don't know that all gold would look good with your helmet. But, maybe where you do some sort of traditional like things where there's gold patches or maybe a little bit more gold number, like a instead of the white number with gold outline, maybe you have the blue jerseys with like gold numbers with the white outline is like a mix up every now and then. Maybe I'd want to look at that. But the green jersey, the white pant with the gold helmet, that's one that I absolutely would love to see. I think that would be, I would be okay doing that every year for a game or two, honestly. And I also would like to see the gold, the blue, and the white. I think that's another one that I would like to see for a game as sort of an alternate, maybe a night game where you have the gold helmet, the traditional blue jersey, and then your road, those road white pants. I wouldn't mind seeing that either. I think that would be that'd be pretty sharp as well. I think it would. So I'd like to see that. That would be. But like, there's all types of things you could maybe draw up that I'd be interested in looking at, as long as it sticks within your traditional color scheme. That's the big stickler for me. Is like, that's what I said. Like, Notre Dame missed a huge opportunity at Yankee Stadium. They really did, because I thought the jerseys were really sharp. I actually really liked the striped pants. The mistake they made was messing with the helmet. If they would have had the traditional helmet with the blue and then the pinstripes, I think that would have been sweet. Absolutely sweet. I would like to do that. Coach Vic said a blue out game, where they go like all blue. We've seen that before, Coach, and I didn't love it, but it wasn't the traditional blue. It was the alt. Remember that in 2014 when they played against Purdue and they went with all blue? I didn't love that, to be honest with you, but it could have just been the way they did it wasn't really as good. I'd be open to an all blue, to be honest with you, but I would I would just need to see a different pattern than what they did before. But we've seen the all blue before. I just didn't love it. But again, they didn't have the traditional helmet, so maybe it would look better with the traditional helmet. They had an alternate helmet for the game too. Because remember back then, the Shamrock, they would alter the helmet every game. I don't know if they still do that. Somebody said this too. Actually, the second time me and my dude Andrew Gilmore agreeing is I did like the alternate against Michigan. The only thing I would ever do to the helmet is what they did in 2011 against Michigan, where they just put the Shamrocks on the side. As an alternate, I would like to see that from time to time. That's the only thing I would do with the helmet. I would not change the helmet. I don't like when they do alternate uniforms and the helmet's not the same. I didn't like it when they put the green and blue stripe down the middle with the interlocking ND. I didn't like the year they had the interlocking ND there. That was 2014 as well. If you want to pop a couple shamrocks on there, I can dig that. But I don't want to see them do too much with the helmet. That's the thing that needs to stay the same. That the helmet, just don't mess with the helmet other than maybe putting a shamrock on there every now and then. But you want to mess with the jerseys and the pants, I'm cool with that. I'm cool with that. I just would need to see a better version. You know what it is? Because I know N8 said the same thing and that Coach Vic said about the all blue. It's that 2014 uniform really soured me on the all blue. Like, just because I didn't like that version. So it's kind of tainted my opinion of the all blue a little bit. So I would need to see just a design of the all blue that I liked. And again, maybe it'll look better with the traditional gold helmet. Maybe. So we'll see. We'll see. I'm more willing today to be more flexible with that than I was 5-6 years ago. I'm being honest. Like 5-6 years ago, I'm like, I don't even like the Shamrock games. Just give me my traditional Notre Dame. But I've kind of come around on that a little bit, to be honest with you. Just because I've seen some of these, and part of that was, to be honest with you guys, is I thought some of the alternates they had were just like for the Shamrocks were just garbage. Like they always did it wrong. But like last year's all green, that was sweet. Like I didn't think I was going to like it, but like that was sweet. Like I love that. The all white on the road, I didn't love that because it was the blue. If they would have maybe used more green, I might have liked it better. But I was like, okay, I like where you're going with it. I'm just definitely more open to that now than before. So that's kind of where I'm at. That's where I'm at on that. Okay, let's get to some more questions here. I've got one. The Shark 83. Is Junior better at end or should he have stayed at linebacker? I think he should have stayed at linebacker, to be honest with you. And you know what? The Shark 83, there was another question. I see we got a couple super chats I'll get to. There was another question that I wanted to get to, and let me see if I can find it. Here it is from Andy Milton fan, because June just reminded me of this question from Andy Milton fan. Andy Milton fan says, which current Notre Dame player would likely have been more highly valued in football 20 years ago? And my answer is the person that the Shark was just talking about. It's Junior Tuihalamaka. I think 20 years ago, Junior Tuihalamaka is a dude at middle linebacker. He's 245, 6'2.5", good in the box quickness and speed, powerful, instinctive, downhill run defender. 20 years ago, like around 2000, 2001, 2002, 2003. I mean, think about it. Think about who Notre Dame's starting Mike linebacker was in 2005. Corey Mays, good player on that team. Him and Brandon Hoyt were two good football players. He would have been great on that team. Junior would have been great on that team. I mean, even in, as a sidekick to playing beside Manti, even 10 years ago, 12 years ago would have been good. But yeah, 20 years ago, Junior Tuihalamaka's like immediately, Nathan, as soon as you asked this question, I was like, oh, Junior, that easy. Junior Tuihalamaka would have been my guy. He would have been a dude, like an absolute dude 20 years ago as a linebacker. Would have loved seeing him there. Love seeing him there. Got a super chat from Tyler Evans. Thank you, Tyler, very, very much. What if Penn State offered Al Golden the head coaching job instead of Al Golden taking the Miami job? How would his career changed? Boy, that is a great question. I think he'd probably still be the head coach at Penn State right now, to be honest with you. Because 2011 was – because he took the job in 2011, right? And I'm trying to remember, was it 2010 or 2011 when all that stuff went down where Paterno got let go and it all went down? Let me go. So 2011 was Paterno's last year. So let's say Al Golden doesn't take the Miami job. All the stuff with Penn State goes down. Al Golden gets that job to replace Paterno. First of all, I don't know that he would have done that. But let's say he got that job in 2012 instead of Bill O'Brien. I don't know that Penn State would have been as good early on because O'Brien had the offensive mindset, but he would have got so much room to work to rebuild because of how bad the sanctions were that I think he would have eventually got that going. I think he would have been very good. He would have been very good. Yeah. That would have, I think he would have done well there. Not great, but done well there. And he would have been an alum. So they would have given him a pass on certain, maybe some bad seasons, but I think he'd have done a good job there. I think he would have done a good job there. I do. I do. I think he's a solid football coach. I think Miami was just a horrible fit for him, in my opinion. Horrible fit. But I think he's a good football coach. Did a really good job at Temple. Really good job at Temple. John B. with a super chat. Thank you, John. LSU had slow starts this last 2 years on offense. Any concern about Mike Denbrock starting slow at Texas A&M, or was that BK? Well, I mean, look, you got a 2022. I don't blame Brian Kelly for that one. I don't think they started. I don't think you could say, well, Brian Kelly's reason. I mean, he's the offensive coordinator, so I think they certainly started slow and would have to play better. They did not start slow in certain way. Like this past year was weird. If you watch the game, I don't know that I'd say they started slow. I'd say they didn't capitalize in the red zone. I mean, they got their first drive, I believe. I'm going to look this up, but I believe their first drive, they got first and goal at the 1 and couldn't punch it in because they had no tight ends and they couldn't get any kind of push. Yeah, they had first and goal at the 1 on their first drive. They scored a touchdown on their second drive. Their third drive, they got it all the way down to 4th and 1 at the 13-yard line and got sacked. And so then you get to, let's see here, lost that possession. Then they had a 3-and-out. Then they had a touchdown. Then end of half, they had 10 plays, 67-yard drive at the end of the first half. Got the ball down, 4th and 10 at the 19-yard line, kicked the field goal. So they were winning 17-14 at halftime of that game, and turned the ball over on downs twice inside the 15-yard line. So they actually moved the ball pretty well on Florida State. Actually, let me put up the yards here. So their first drive, they went 61 yards. Their second drive, they went 75 yards and scored a touchdown. Their third drive, they went 70 yards and had turnover on downs. Their next drive, they had an 8-yard drive, 3-and-out. Their next drive, they went 51 yards and scored a touchdown. Their next drive, they went 67 yards and kicked a field goal. So they had 17 points and 332 yards of offense in the first half against Florida State. Their problem is they turned the ball over, and they turned it over in the second half. They turned the ball over twice, and they couldn't run the football. And Florida State just took advantage of that garbage defense they had. But the offense came out. I mean, the offense had 459 yards of offense and threw the ball for 346 yards and scored 17 points in the first half. So I don't know that they started slow. I think they were sloppy. They had missed opportunities in that game. So I don't know that I'd say I don't agree with the notion that they started slow 2 years in a row. I think they were sloppy last year, and that's a sort of an ingredient of Brian Kelly's teams. They just don't come out super sharp a lot of times early in the year. So, but no, I don't have any concern for that. And if you look at Mike Denbrock's tenure, Notre Dame tended to play well in first games. You know, you look at 2014, they just dominated Rice. 2015, they ate Texas alive. 2016, even though he wasn't as predominantly calling plays in 2016 like he was in 2015, they still went out that year and scored, moved the ball up and down the field against Texas again in 2016. So I don't know that I'd say scoring or slow starts is something that's been a problem throughout his career. I think it was more so just that 2022 season is more so the problem to me. So I'd be more concerned about that than anything else. So not something that I'm overly concerned about. Don't ignore it, because you always look at data. You don't ignore it, but it's not something that I'm overly concerned about right now. Super chat from Alan Watson. I did the sauna twice a day, first in the morning and again around dinner. Lots of fluids, green tea and dandelion tea. Took a week, no withdrawals. That's a follow-up to yesterday. So I appreciate that, Alan. I will I'll look into that and talk to my wife about that, see what she thinks about it. Aiden Benami, who do you think will have a better individual year? Cade Klubnik, DJ Uyunglele, Mason Graham Mertz, or Cam Ward? Who do I think will have a better individual year? I mean, if we're just talking stats, probably Cam Ward. Who do I think who will be the quarterback of the best team? Right now, I lean towards DJ at Clemson, although Cade could certainly be there. I think Graham Mertz is going to have a rough year, and it's not going to be Graham Mertz's fault. It's going to be Florida's fault. He's got such a bad situation around him. I just think he's going to be running for his life all year and just really struggling. But he had a nice year last year. He really did. But I'd probably go towards Cam Ward statistically, DJ from a win standpoint. I like Cade Klubnik. I liked him a lot coming to high school, but he just has not taken that step for me. Could it happen this season? Sure, it could happen, but I need to see it. Aiden Benami also asks, do you think Gal Golden will blitz as much as he has the last 2 years? I do. I just think that's who he is, and he's got very athletic linebackers. And so that's just what he does. That's what he believes in. I don't think he blitzed a lot out of necessity. I think that's just what he believes in. But it's sound. His blitz schemes are sound, which I'm good with. I'm fine with that. Indy Milton fan, which current or former Notre Dame coach or player would you most want to grab a beer with? Man, you've been listening to the show how long? You know I don't drink beer. So I wouldn't want to grab a beer with anybody. Who would I want to go hang out with and talk with? Probably Rocket Ismail, because he was kind of I had several oh my gosh, favorite player growing up. You know, Brady Quinn was one as I was an adult. But as a kid, my three favorite players were Tony Rice, Rocket Ismail, and Todd Light. And I've actually had a chance to sit down and have dinner with Coach Light after his Notre Dame career was over and get to know him a little bit. And I've never had a chance to meet with Rocket Ismail or Tony Rice. So between those two guys, I'd probably go with Rocket just because he was my favorite player growing up. And I've heard he's a very unique guy, very smart guy, very interesting guy. So I'd probably enjoy talking with him. So probably Rocket. But as long as we can do something other than beer, I'd be down with that for sure. John A1 says, which third-year players can tempt NFL teams into 25 draft? Eli Raridon, Josh Burnham. I'd go Benjamin Morrison would be one that I would certainly look at. He'd be a guy. I mean, potentially Billy Strouth, although I think Billy's going to need another year. Potentially Jadarian Price if he has a really big breakout. But again, I'd like to see another year of him. Those are the ones that kind of jump out to me as players that are true juniors. That could maybe jump out and have an impact this season. Those are definitely some guys. So I'd like to see that. John A1 also asks, is it possible for Jason Onye to pass one of the starters in total snaps in 2024? If there's an injury, yes. If there's an injury, I would need to. I think that's possible. The only scenario I can think of is there's a nice easy rotation, and then just Jason gets some more snaps in backup situations of blowing people out. I mean, sure. But no, I don't think so. I mean, I think he's going to be a really good player for Notre Dame this year, but I don't see him basically that would mean he's going to beat those guys out. And I don't think that's going to be the case. I don't think he's going to beat those guys out. So we'll see. John A1, this is speaking of the previous question I had. Who is the best true freshman Notre Dame player you've seen in your lifetime on both offense and defense? For me, it's Manti Te'o and Michael Floyd. Well, for offense, it's Rocket Ismail for me. And John, I'm a lot older than you, so I know that you didn't get a chance to see Rocket as a freshman. So for me, it would be Rocket Ismail. For defense, that's a very good question. You know, Manti was pretty good as a freshman. I thought Aaron Lynch was really good as a freshman as well. Benjamin Morrison was really good as a freshman. I'm trying to even think of some other guys that even played a bunch as freshmen on defense. And I know there's some that I'm drawing a blank on, but those would be three guys that I would consider for defense. Maybe lean towards Manti, but Manti didn't really start early on that year. He kind of eventually came on and played a lot more. I don't know. That's a tough one. That's a really tough one between those three. Aaron Lynch, just who pops out top of my head. Aaron Lynch in 11. Thinking about, well, you know who another one that was really good as a freshman? Kavari Russell was excellent as a freshman. Sheldon Day was a backup in 2012, but the freshman that started on that 2012 team was really, really good was Kavari Russell. He was a very good player on that team. Very good player on that team. So he's one that I would consider as well. So Kavari, Benjamin Morrison, Aaron Lynch, Manti are the four that pop in my head. Jalen was good as a freshman, but he wasn't as dynamic as some of those other guys. Jalen flat, because like remember, Brandon, they had Jalen playing that what was it, the dog position, right? Where it was like the 3-4 defense, like out in space a lot, and they didn't let him attack a whole ton. He had like 60 tackles his freshman. He was good. But you could see the talent, but they didn't put him in a lot of go dominate situations like Aaron Lynch was put in 2011 and like Kavari and those guys were put in. So, Kyle Hamilton, somebody said he did have some crazy flash plays, Brando. There's no doubt. I think those other guys were just better overall. Those are guys. And I'd have to go back and look in the 2000s. I have to think there had to be some freshmen that played back then. I just can't remember who those guys might be. And so I'd have to think through that one. That's a good question. That's a good question, John. Let's see here. Muhammad Abdi says, Brian, what new rule will you have implemented if you were in charge of college football? Ooh, that's a good one, Muhammad. So does it have to be an on-field rule? If it had to be an on-field rule, that's a good one. Okay. So one thing that I would do is and I have to think how to do this. I would set rules on substitutions. And I would say that if you don't make a substitution on offense within the first like 3 seconds of the play being over, you can't sub. And then the complement that would be on defense, like you got to get off the field with some pep, right? Like if I'm official, offensive guy comes in. Once that offensive guy either gets lined up or gets to the huddle, I'm counting to 5, 2, 3, 4, 5. If you're not off the field, it's delay a game. Because what they're doing now is like offensive teams are subbing late. And then the rule is, you wait until the defensive guy gets up. Well, and then what defensive coaches are doing is their guys take their sweet old time getting off the field, which slows the game down, which I understand, but then sometimes can cause delay games for the offense. Well, first of all, you shouldn't be making a sub that late. You shouldn't be allowed to do it that late. Like I'd go like maybe 3 count, maybe a 5 count, and you can control it by the officials on the sideline. Like I'm counting, 1, 2, maybe have a stopwatch, 3 to 5 seconds. If you haven't sent a sub in by then you don't do it unless it's an injury. And then that is guy goes down and now we have an injury timeout. Then you can make a substitution. That would be something I would do, because this substituting they're doing now, like offensive guys getting sent in late and then defensive guys like power walking off the field. Like, nah, I don't like that. I'm not a big fan of that. Not a big fan of that at all. If I was in charge of college football and I could make off the field rules, I would do whatever I had to do to fix the portal, to fix the transfer portal, and to create more. Like Brian Smith tweeted about this yesterday. You guys saw the Falcons got dinged like draft picks and fine money and stuff like that for tampering with Kirk Cousins and some other free agents. You tamper in the NFL, you get hammered. I would create very harsh tampering rules in college football. If you have any contact with a parent, handler, player, or anyone that is in charge of a player at another team before he enters the portal, even if it's I talked to his high school head coach, let him know we'd be interested, then anything. So like if I'm Georgia or if I'm Ohio State, let's just say hypothetically, Ohio State wants Benjamin Morrison to come to Ohio State. They don't. I have no evidence of this. I'm just throwing them out there just for conversation's sake. And they call the coach at Brophy Prep and say, hey, if Benjamin gets in the portal, we'd be interested. Violation. Now, you say, well, what if they wanted to recruit Cree Thomas? Cool. You can call the coach and talk about Cree Thomas. Benjamin Morrison is an off-limits conversation. Can't talk about it. And if you do, you have strict penalties. And what I would do is I would actually kind of adopt sort of the Major League Baseball rule where, and I don't know if it's still like this, but when I followed Major League Baseball, they like the international signings, right? Like you have, if you violated like rules in the international market. You couldn't sign an international player for like 3 years. So if you tamper with a recruit, you not only get fined financially, but your school is barred for 3 years from taking portal kids. So, $500,000 fine, $1 million fine, whatever, but you can't go to the portal to get a kid for 3 years if you tamper, like genuine tampering. That's absolutely what I would do. And I think that would get rid of a lot. Because then, now it's like, okay, kids are jumping into portal still, but you're not going to see as much because kids, and that would include anyone related to your institution. It would involve collectives. It would be a lot of different things. I would do all that because you have to stop the tampering. And then even if you can't fix the portal, you'd still be able to fix that. The NCAA just cowering on the portal and just making that a forever thing is just one of the biggest travesties of college football. As you all know, I'm a pro NIL. I think NIL is a thing that should have been done a long time ago. Now, I would have done it differently, but and by the way, somebody asked, what about players? No contact. You want to jump in the portal because you want to go somewhere else, then jump in the portal and take your chances. There can be no contact. You can't reach out to another school and say, hey, coach, I'd like to transfer. Nothing. Tampering goes both ways. Now, what I would not hurt a school that said, hey, this kid reached out to us. We had no interest in it, But like, look, if a kid reaches out to you and he goes in the portal, then you have to report that and you can't be part of it. You can't respond to it. You can't interact with it. You can't do anything with it. You have to fix tampering. You have to fix tampering. And that's a big part of it. And you're going to see less kids jump in to the portal if they don't already have things worked out. There's still going to be guys that do it, but now it's not like, hey, I'm jumping the portal because I'm going here. You would see a lot less cheating. But here's the thing, what they would do, they're eventually going to make tampering rules. But it's just going to be like, oh, you get fined $5,000 and, slap on the wrist, and we're going to put you on probation, which means nothing. It'll have no teeth, in my opinion. If they really want to stop tampering, they will put some serious teeth to it. We're not telling kids they can't transfer. We're not telling kids they can't transfer however many times they want. All we're saying is when a kid is a part of another institution, you cannot in any way, shape, form, or fashion tamper with that kid. And it goes the other way too, is like if you're an agent and you're reaching out, like if you're an agent for teams, I don't believe you can start getting offers from other teams while a guy is still signed with another team. I don't think you can do that in the NFL. But that's how you go. And I don't care if it benefited Notre Dame or not. I don't care. That you guys should know me well enough to know by now that if I believe in something, I don't care if it's benefited Notre Dame or not. I don't. The portal has been good for Notre Dame. Don't care. I'd still change the rules. It doesn't matter. I don't think it's right. I care more about, are we doing right by young people? And right now, we're not doing right by young people. A lot of people think, well, we're giving them money and giving them free. That's not good that's not good. Throwing money at them, giving them freedom. Freedom from what? Accountability? Like I hear, well, kids should be able to transfer. They've always been able to transfer. There's literally never been a rule that said kids couldn't transfer. Ever. Kids could transfer. There were restrictions on where you can transfer to, which I didn't like. And then you had to sit out a year. Okay, that I do like, with some exceptions. So I just don't think that what we're doing now to young people is good. Giving them the NIL the way that it is now, that's not good for young people. That's terrible for young people. Well, they're getting money. Okay, if you're dominated by money, then that's on you. That's not me. I think there's a lot more to developing young people than just throwing money at them and saying, hey, go have at it. I mean, look at professional sports. I mean, you guys remember that ESPN 30 for 30 they did a few years ago, the broke one, and you got all these guys that made hundreds of millions of dollars. They're broke. Why? Because no one ever taught them how to handle that money. They didn't care about developing them as young men. They just cared about using them up and then letting them go do what they're going to do. We should care more as a society about developing young men to be responsible young men, whether they're athletes or not. And our country would be a way better place if everybody from every political persuasion cared a lot more about developing good, moral young men with some stones, right? That understood what it truly meant to lead their families, to defend their community, to be engaged civically and all these different things, to be good bosses and be good employers and all this kind of stuff, to be good fathers, be a father, period, be a present father. Like, those are so much more important to me than whether or not we give a kid $500,000 because he's good at football. I don't care about that. Now, do I think those avenues should be there? Yes. But we're missing so much that's important to developing these young people. And there's so many people in the media and in our society that think, well, because they're getting paid and they have the freedom to transfer whenever, that's somehow good for them. I'm telling you, the burden on young men now in college athletics is so much harder than it was before, because now they got every piranha out there is coming at them, and we've done nothing to protect them, nothing to build them up, nothing to give them the resources to be successful as a society. Now, there are some schools that are doing some certain things. I really like what Notre Dame's doing, and there's some others. But as a whole, we're just throwing these men to the sharks because, we don't want to lead, because our generation of older people are not leading these young men. It's okay to you know what, you don't want that baby, whatever. You don't want to be a father, whatever. You don't want to do this. It's cool, man. You go do you. Screw that. Be a man. You were man enough to go do what it took to go make that baby. Be man enough to take care of that baby, right? You're man enough to make this money. Be man enough to be responsible and accountable and truthful and live by a certain standard and expectations and rules. But how can we ask young people to live by that standard when we allow coaches to cheat nonstop, right? So make that rule first. Then we can deal with how can we make this a better experience for our young people, where they're getting their piece of the pie that they deserve, that they've earned their cut of the pie. But we're doing it in a way where we're also still putting a lot of value on what kind of young men are we producing. I don't care that my players are making X million amount of dollars when they leave here if they're blowing it all and you've got, guys having 7 kids with 6 different women. So what that he made a lot of money? I don't care. He's not a leader. He's not a father. He's not a man that I look up to, that I want my son to be. He just runs a 4.2, or he can throw a football 50 yards, or he's a great left tackle. None of that has anything to do with who you are as a young man. And you should, as a coach, take more pride. I've said this to my players. When we have our 20-year reunion from our championships, I'm going to care a lot more about what kind of husband you are, what kind of father you are, what kind of employer you are, and what kind of employee you are. Way more than I'm going to care that you were great at football when you were 20. But right now, there's too many people that don't care about that as long as he's good at football. I'll let whatever he's going to do, we'll justify all these kind of things as long as he's good at football. Where if some dude that wasn't good at football did those same things, you're like, what a bum, what a this, what a that. No. But we're not doing a good enough job in raising young people, and we're setting these horrible examples. And you know who's doing it? Older people. So how can we, this is what we've done as a society. We want to blame players. Oh, these players aren't loyal. They don't do. We as grown-ups have created a system that is allowing these players to do that. We're going to make all these stupid rules about you can transfer whenever you want, you can take this amount of money, but we're going to tell Jaden Rashada he's wrong for demanding that money that someone agreed to pay him. How about we have a system in place where he doesn't have that option? How about we have a system in place that cares more about what can we do to develop Jaden Rashada as a young man that then is going to benefit him as a player? We created these systems, and then we get pissed at teenagers for taking advantage of the system. No, this is on us. This is on us. There are not enough leaders as men right now. There's not enough dads standing up and saying, this is wrong. There are some. There definitely are some. But they're not the people we lift up. It's the same thing with media. Go let a guy get in trouble. There's I tweeted, there's some thing about Jose Altuve, baseball player. And there's some kid that got burned real bad in a fire. And Panama. I don't think he's from Panama. I think he's Dominican, Venezuela or something. And he goes down there and he takes his time and money, goes and sees this kid. Kid's a big Jose Altuve fan. And I'm like, man, I never heard about this. I'll hear about Rashee Rice doing his thing, or Brett Favre sending the pics to that chick. We hear that all the time. When professional athletes do stupid stuff, man, we sell the heck out of that. Let some professional athlete be part of raising millions of dollars in this community to help kids that he's not promoting it, right? And, oh, we don't want to talk about that. That doesn't sell. So now we have this vision of, well, athletes are like this. Athletes are like that. No, they're not like that. We have lifted up that storyline to make people think that and said, oh, well, you can only be successful doing this, or you can only do this. Instead of saying, hey, look, let's lift up these people. Let's lift up these student athletes. Let's set this standard. Let's set this example. So if you don't want players jumping in the portal and because people reach out to them, then make there be very hard rules. If you do, as an adult, as a coach, as a collective person, as a parent, whoever, if somebody affiliated with your institution tampers, you're getting hammered. $1 million fine, 3 years, no portal for you. No portal for you. I don't care if it's a walk-on. You can't have walk-on portal guys for 3 years. Let's fix that system. Let's start holding the adults accountable for their actions. Then we can worry about what we're doing to the kids. Then we can say, hey, look, man, you need to do this the right way. We're holding coaches accountable. Now you got to be accountable. But we always want to say the players need to do something. The players need to do this. The players need to do that. And we don't hold accountable the people that set the rules for this situation. Well, the players are greedy. Well, yeah, because everybody else is. So we're going to be mad at players for wanting to get the most of the system that they can get. Isn't that what the NCAA and the conferences and the school president have been doing for decades? Haven't they just been why was there hesitation to give players part of the pie? Because they wanted to keep it all themselves. Oh, well, we protect amateurism. Then why did you kick Jeremy Bloom out? How did Jeremy Bloom making money as a freaking skier give him an unfair advantage as a football player? How did a kicker at UCF who was doing YouTube videos that didn't even have anything to do with football give him some sort of unfair advantage? You had to ruin his career. That was about greed. You didn't want to open up that avenue where players could in any way profit from what they were doing. You wanted it all. And this is what you get. So let's not blame the young people for being greedy when it's the adults that have created this problem. We need to fix what we broke. Then we can talk to the young people about how you need to be more accountable and care more about building up young men as opposed to saying, what can we do to give them more freedom? That's not freedom. That's not freedom. What they have right now is not freedom. It's not. They're getting crushed right now. We're not protecting them right now. And it's our job as the adults in the room to make sure that we're giving the lessons to young people that are going to make them make better choices. And we're not. Because if I tell that kid that hard truth, he may not want to come play for me. If I tell that kid this hard truth, he may transfer. And I don't want him to transfer because if he's a good player and if he transfers, I may get fired. So self-preservation, I'm going to do what's best for me. That's sad. That's sad for me. That's not what it's supposed to be. That's not why you should coach. If you're into coaching just to make money then you're missing the boat. Go do something else. Go coach professional athletes. Get away from kids. If your number one goal as a coach in the high school, college, or Pop Warner level is anything other than I want to develop young men, do something else. Doesn't mean you can't win. I cared about developing young people. I got a national championship ring. I won conference championship. I coached All-Americans. I coached all conference players. But you know what? Do you think my dad cared more about that? Or do you think he cared more about, did you lead these men? Did you encourage these men? Did you create accountability for these young men? No, it was that. And that's how it should be. And if you're a coach and you care more about winning and losing than you care about developing young men and you're willing to sacrifice that for winning and losing, you find something else to do because this is too important of a profession, in my opinion. Think about it. What in life has had a greater impact on what kind of men we are putting into society than sports and the military? Name me something. You'll have leaders of big businesses that will talk about lessons they learned while playing sports. And we've lost that. We've lost that way too much, in my opinion. and it bleeds into all these other things. And I've gone on this long rant. I'm sorry, but it really frustrates me because I see what's happening, and it's not even about the sport. It's about what kind of people we are, and it just makes me sad. It does. It makes me angry, but it also makes me very sad. And yeah. So anyway, Muhammad, you got me pretty fired up today, man. So I appreciate that. I'm gonna answer just a couple more and move on to and we'll wrap it up today because that went a little bit long. So let me get to this one. From Woo Riders, I think that's dog, maybe DG. Realistically, how far off is Notre Dame from winning a title? Thanks. I don't think they're far off at all. I've said this for a few years. I think Notre Dame is a lot closer than people think. I think Notre Dame has been a player here, a coach here from doing it. I think Notre Dame has had multiple teams in the last 10 years that had a chance to compete for a championship from a roster standpoint, but certain things that were done in the coaching standpoint kept in their way. I think the 2015 team was arguably the most talented team in college football that year, certainly in the top 2 or 3. If they had, a friend of mine said this to me the other day, goes, what if in 2014, a buddy of mine said this to me, and I thought it was just a great analogy. He goes, what if in 2014, Brian Kelly would have fired Brian Van Gorder and instead, and then gone and promoted, or even after 2013 when Bob Diaco left, what if he would have hired Dave Aranda instead of Brian Van Gorder? And I started thinking about like that defensive talent in 2015, and I'm like, man, could you imagine what Dave Aranda would have done in 2015 with the talent that Notre Dame had? Are you kidding me? Like, that would have been ridiculous. And when you look at the success he had, in 2015, Wisconsin gave up 13.7 points per game. Think about that. 13.7 points per game. Like, could you imagine? Here's their top 10 leading tacklers: TJ Edwards, Joe Schobert, Vince Beagle, Michael Caputo, Jack Sitchie, Chris Orr, Darius Hillary, Tanner McAvoy, Chekwa Abasi, and Derek Tyndall. Some decent players there, right? Some decent players there. Let me name you the leading tacklers for Notre Dame in 2015. Jalen Smith, Joe Schmidt, Elijah Shoemate, Max Redfield, Isaac Rochelle, Kavari Russell, Romeo Akwara, Sheldon Day, Cole Luke, Matthias Farley. That team also had Greer Martini, Jarrett Grace, Niles Morgan, Andrew Trombetti, Tavon Coney, Jerry Tillery, Drew Tranquil, Nick Watkins. What would Dave Aranda have done with that group of players? So when I hear people say, well, Notre Dame hasn't had the talent to win, bull crap. That 2015 team had that. Go look at the roster that Notre Dame had in 2011 and tell me that team shouldn't have been a team that competed for a championship. I don't want to hear it. It was the 2012 team that we saw play for a championship, but they also still had Michael Floyd and Harrison Smith and Darius Fleming and Sean Swinar and Trevor Robinson and Jonas Gray. So Notre Dame wasted a lot of talent in the last 10 to 15 years, in my opinion. And so now it's like, do you have the coaching in position to go out there and be successful? And, that's going to be the question. And I think that they do. There's still some things we need to learn about Coach Freeman. There's still some questions like, is Al Golden that guy? Is Joe Rudolph that guy? Well, we'll see. We'll see. I'm hopeful they are, but I think this team has a chance to be really good. I'll challenge you guys to do this weekend. Go home, get on your computer, go to cfbstats.com and think through what Notre Dame's roster looks like right now. And then go there and go back to some of those 2020 teams and the 2018 team and the 2015 team and the 2014 team and the 2012 team and the 2011 team and just look through the roster top to bottom and then look at this roster and tell me what you think. When we come back on Tuesday, tell me what you think. I'll tell you what I think. Do they have the top level stars that maybe some of those teams had? Maybe. It's arguable. But when you look at like players 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, like what did I say about the Bama team in 2012? Like Notre Dame's top 5, in my opinion, could hang with Alabama's top 5. You're talking Tyler Eifert. You're talking Sheldon Day. You're talking Zach Martin. You're talking Stephon Tuitt, Lewis Nix, Manti. I mean, you take Notre Dame's top 5 or 6 guys, they can compete with anybody Bama had. The difference is once you get past like that top 6 or 7, it's a big gap. Big gap. You get down to like 15, 16, 17, huge gap. Right? That's the difference. Well, now you look at this team and they have that kind of depth. And whether you want to look at recruiting rankings or whether you want to look at whatever, I mean, it's so much different. You think about, look at some of the guys who were starting on the undefeated teams Notre Dame's had, and then compare it to the guys that are going to be starting now. And you're like, wow, this team's really talented. But we've conditioned ourselves to kind of expect them to it's the BK PTSD, right? This is my biggest complaint with Brian Kelly. He kept talking down the talent. And in reality, it was his issues that created the problems that Notre Dame had, not the players. Well, now I don't think you have that same roadblock. Now we'll just see if Coach Freeman's the guy to get them over the hump. We'll see. I don't know if he is or isn't because he hasn't done it yet. Is Al Golden and Mike Denbrock the duo to be that? I think they can be, but we don't know yet. They haven't done it yet. But I think the roster's in place for the next year or 2 or 3. Like next 3 years, I've said this. Next 3 years, I think Notre Dame wins a title. I've said that. I believe that. Maybe 4 years. I just look at their talent. I mean, quarterback, not a problem anymore. O-line, as good as anybody in the country. Right? Corners, recruiting as well as anybody in the country. Receivers, needs to get better, still pretty good. Tight end, better, as good as anybody in the country. Running back, as good as anybody in the country. Linebacker, as good as anybody in the country. I mean, like, there's some places they got to get a little bit better, but, man, they're recruiting at a very high level right now. And now they just got to go put it all together. But I think they have a shot to do so. I do. I wholeheartedly – that's not me selling you guys something. That's not me spinning. I could be wrong, but I cross my heart. I truly believe that. I do. I absolutely believe that this team is going to compete for and win a championship in the next 4 years. Again, I could be wrong. I'm not spinning anything. I'm not giving you a homer take. This is what I truly believe. And it's because of all the things I've talked about. And the school is supporting Notre Dame in a way where the excuses aren't there anymore. So that's kind of how I feel. So that's going to do it for today. I didn't get to all the questions, but I'm starting to lose my voice a little bit. I do apologize to all y'all. There's still some really good questions left on the board. Ben Tarnowski asks, how excited am I about the CFB season in general compared to years past? Dude, I'm super excited about it. There's the uncertainty. Well, Notre Dame's really good. The uncertainty of it, I'm excited about it. I really am. I'm excited about this Notre Dame team. It's a great question, Ben. I think it's going to be a fun year. I really do. I think it's going to be a fun year, and I hope you guys stick around and enjoy it with me here at Irish Breakdown. So that's going to do it for today's show. I thank you all so much for being with me. Thank you for putting up with my long rant. I really appreciate that very much, of course. We'll be back tomorrow or tonight, 5 o'clock, here in about 42 minutes. The guys are going to be going with their Friday rapid fire. We'll be back on Monday. Ryan and Sean will be back on Monday with a recruiting hour, and then I'll be back on Tuesday with another solo show, and we're going to talk some more Notre Dame football. So hit that like, hit that subscribe, hit the notification bell, share this podcast, give us a 5-star review. We greatly, greatly appreciate that. And we can always continue these conversations on the message board because then I don't have to talk and I can salvage my voice a little bit. But I appreciate y'all very much for being with me today. Have a great rest of your weekend. Have an awesome weekend. Give your love to your family. Thank them from me for letting you guys be part of what we're doing here and spending the time with us. Greatly, greatly appreciate that. And we'll talk to you guys again here very soon on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.